I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. This is the City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 2nd. Madam City Clerk, would you call the roll, please?
Certainly. Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Hornish. Councilmember Jason Ritchie.
Present.
Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Romero Valderrama.
Present.
And this evening we have Boy Scout Troop number 596 from Sammamish and Redmond, who is going to post the colors and help us lead us in the pledge.
Color guard attention. Color guard forward march. Color guard post the colors. Scout salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Color guard reform ranks. Audience may be seated. Color guard dismissed.
See if I can actually sit.
Can we give them a hand? That was well done.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, the agenda is accepted. We'll next move to public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council, 3-minute limit per person, or 5 minutes of representing the official position of a recognized community organization. If you would like to show a video or PowerPoint, it must be submitted or emailed by 5 p.m. to the end of business day to our city clerk, Melanie Anderson, at manderson@sammamish.us. Please be aware that council meetings are videotaped and available to the public. First, I have Paul Stickney, followed by Mary Wichter and Daryl Roberts.
No, I'm just teasing. Good evening, council. My name, Paul Stickney. I'm at 22626 Northeast Inglewood Hill Road. And here's the clicker. My comment this evening is on the housing strategy plan and the comp plan. And it's time to inform, alter, and improve. So as some council members say, just tell me. Well, we'll do that. I suggest that we put on hold the housing strategy plan and other plans that have their core foundation in land use, resolve to alter land use, numbers, and policies in the comp plan for internal housing balance. Then after making those changes, change the plans and create great wealth for our community. Here's the wealth that is created. The issue to be resolved is to modestly optimize housing supplies that are long-term balanced to needs and wants for all those living in Sammamish. This is about retention, not attraction, and it's about only positives for our community, no negatives. And it's not about re-expanding the circle of housing, it's actually about filling it in. When the city incorporated back in 1999, there was far more single-family capacity than exists today. Through character and environmental-based ordinances, the number of homes that could be built has shrunk significantly. However, what has never been filled in are the types and kinds of housing to meet the needs of the folks that live in the single-family housing and work here over time. And that's what this is all about. So how to fill this in is with the CHU, which we've talked about, And this is information. There are 120 economic and demographic housing need gaps, numbers to get, and then with those numbers inform statistically valid surveys, then have a citywide chat about the pros and cons of what level of meeting wants and needs, and the consequences, short, mid, and long term, and then get informed community consensus with all that information. That's the inform. It's time to alter from level 2 regarding housing, which has been as little as possible, which I understand, and move to reason-based, lower, medium, optimal, which would reduce what we have too much of and increase what we do not. At the end of the day, it would lead to two really fun council questions. One, have single-family oversupplies been lessened enough, or are further reductions warranted? Or two, to what extent are smaller, different, and diverse housing shortages decreased by adding supply? Why do this? For a sustainable Sammamish, for enduring holistic stability, to keep our town strong by modestly optimizing the private built environment, which is attained through internal housing balance. And I'm done. But in your packet, there are 10 other slides for your enjoyment, and feel free to call me and chat anytime.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we have Mary Wichter, Gerald Roberts, and then James Eastman.
Hello, my name is Mary Wichter, and I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish, and I should have a PowerPoint. So tonight, I'm also going to talk on the housing strategy plan because I've missed a couple meetings due to work, travel, and other commitments. So tonight, I wanted to talk about amend your motions and things coming to you for the housing strategy plan, because you need to recognize your shortages and reduce the number of single-family homes and increase the amount that can be put into town center to make a better tomorrow for Sammamish. We have about 90% single-family homes in Sammamish, so that only leaves 10% that's actually multifamily at this time. We just have way too big an out-of-balance problem. Oops. And the 2003 comp plan data actually was a bit more complete than what we currently have, even with the ARCH analysis, which Art Sullivan has been doing. We really do need the needs analysis to determine what the wants and preferences are for people who live here, because there are a lot of gaps. And when I first met Paul Stickney, he said affordable housing is not the same as housing affordability. We are getting the affordable housing. Everybody struggles with that, but that's only the bottom end. Housing affordability affects everybody except the people on the very top end. So you have been challenged by the Growth Management Hearing Board, and I think with what the city, the consultants, and Stickney and Burr have recommended will remedy that. Right now, you're really out of balance, and if you only deal with the lowest three through policy, you're never going to get out of that balance. You're still going to have the 6 to 10% of single-family homes. You'll never get out of that. So what you need to do is look at the meeting all the housing needs. It's not just the lowest three. It's a wider number of economic and demographic needs, and you need to do surveys or input to get those. And then if you optimize that and you put a lot of it in town center, you'll be able to have the more small units that you really need. And you do need to change the comp plan for that, the town center plan, development regulations, and zoning. So this is the time to do that. It doesn't add traffic because people will live locally. They'll use town center to shop, work, and play. They won't drive off the plateau for everything. There'll be actually less cars. And the time to do it is now because we have the housing deficiencies. They're not getting better through the things that we've done. Seniors need a place to live, people downsizing, new residents, people that are here for the services and the jobs, teachers, firefighters, police, single people, older people, and our kids. They can't afford to live here either, so we need to fix the supply now. Because we really need the right mix. We can't do a redo on town center later. There's one spot for it. It's there, and you kind of got to figure out what that mix is right now. So this slide has a lot of numbers. Right now there's about 21,000 single family. You're going to go up to about 25,000. And if you only add 2,000 single family and 2,000 of the smaller units, you only get to 4. So what you really need to do is increase that number to 6,000, 8,000, 16,000, whatever you want to, because growth is not what we're talking about here. You also need to have over 2,000 jobs added, and you need to have the economic needs for all the types, because they're really not the same. Just dealing with growth numbers, which is always going to increase, you need to look at the mix of what you have. So you need an optimal supply to get a housing balance, and then that will affect housing affordability in a positive way for the city and also your long-term revenues and finances. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Next, I have Daryl Roberts, James Eastman, followed by Todd Levitt.
Good evening. My name is Daryl Roberts. I'm the president of the LifeWire organization, formerly known as Eastside Domestic Violence. Excuse me?
Address, please.
Oh,
Thank you.
4539 281st Place Southeast, behind Endeavor. Okay. I came here tonight because I joined the board. Well, let me start. I joined the board because I had a family friend that experienced some domestic violence. The news reports a lot of things about physical domestic violence, but it happened to be more the mental and control, which is a majority of the domestic violence that goes on. I did a lot of reading. I researched the organization and found out it was one of the most comprehensive domestic violence associations in Washington State. And I've been there for 6 years and pleased to be a part of it. I came here tonight to acknowledge you and say thank you because you have a proclamation that's on your agenda, and I wanted to thank you for the support you've given, not only for the services, helping people find the services, but the relationships and partnerships we've had with you and the police department has been significant. And a number of the people that I speak with through the organization, they definitely refer to the Sammamish organization and the council and the support you've provided. So I just wanted to say thank you, and again, I'm pleased that you have the proclamation on your agenda tonight. Thank you.
Next, I have James Eastman, Todd Levitt, followed by Christy Jenkins.
James Eastman, vacant property, 196th Avenue Northeast. Have a few things. Was looking at the parks yesterday, and you got 4 parks all within a mile of each other. You got Pine Lake Commons, the New Beaton, and the Big Lake. So spread out the love. I mean, you guys are throwing all the money to parks you got to drive to. There are other places in the city, so throw some money our way. East Lake Sammamish Parkway. You're exempting all the intersections and the volume. Look at doing some road improvements there. Campton Road. Yeah, you say it's in Redmond, but all the people that can't make a left-hand turn there are turning into Sammamish. Be nice to have a middle lane there. At least put up some no parking signs where people park for the lake, because when they park there, you can't see. It's dangerous. Do something. But really, just because you've exempted the parkway from concurrency doesn't mean it can't be improved. Provide some passenger or some trail, some street crossings. Also, 25 years ago when they created the East Basin Plan and enacted the no disturbance zone, we were supposed to get TDR credits. Still don't have the TDR program. When I was here 2 years ago, you told me, oh, it's okay. We're taking your pilot program away that you waited 3 years for. You can use TDRs, or hey, you can build outside this buildable area that we're calling the no disturbance zone, and just concentrate your density there. So, we wait 3 years for the pilot program to go effect. We get the moratorium for 6 months for the pilot program. Then we get another year for the traffic, and now we just got a brand new development regulations. So if I own 50 acres of land, 40 of which are encumbered, plenty of which are buildable in the NDA, I only got 10 left. And then I got to take 5 of those acres and preserve them for trees, because our tree code says, well, the other 40 acres that you have of forest, those aren't good enough trees, so we're not going to count those. So now I only got 5 acres left. I got to take out the streets, and then we have this new development code where I got to add all this other stuff. It's like, it's just the straw that breaks the camel's back in this city. There's no other cities that have regulation upon regulation upon regulation. Nobody has the no disturbance zone, the erosion hazards overlay. I mean, I got 50 acres of land. I got plenty of forests that we could put trails in, we could put parks in, we could look at it holistically. But no, we gear our code where we just add one thing upon another thing upon another thing, and you force people into a small area, and you're really not accomplishing what you set out to do. Where if you had holistic regulations and looked at a site specifically and said, you know what, maybe it makes sense to mass grade this area and make it really nice and put retaining walls in and, try to take the slope out of the land because it's better for it to be flat. But anyways, I really wish we would start looking at things holistically and not keep backing people into a corner with these regulations. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, I have Todd Levitt, Christy Jenkins, and if there's anyone else that would like to address the council, you can just kind of line up along the wall there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Todd Levitt, 14410 Bellred Road, Bellevue, Washington, 98007. Good evening, council. 2 weeks ago, I sat in this chamber with many tied to the development community, whether you were a landowner, whether you were a builder, a developer. The room was pretty packed. I think you all remember the evening very well, and it was really a good night for most of us up until about, call it 10:45, 11 o'clock, come to find out, where we watched the culmination of hard work by staff and council to approve the new concurrency model, as well as add some exemptions to the moratorium, which took out short plats and long plats. So I think many of us, if not all of us, walked out shortly after that in the hallways and collectively exhaled that we could finally get back to business, working in Sammamish, doing business with a city we have utmost respect and staff who we enjoy working with immensely. Come to find out the next day, about 2 o'clock, my email starts to blow up, where essentially any pre-app that we had filed and conducted with the city was pretty much thrown out because interim development regulations were approved the prior evening. Being confused, as anybody else who'd gotten that email, not seeing that on the agenda, went back and watched the videotape, come to find out that some interim development regulations, which you just heard about, were approved late in the evening. That was, again, not on the agenda. I'm not here to get into the interim development regulations. There'll be another venue to do that. As we can see by the email traffic from staff, that council's already directed staff to start reaching out to the stakeholders associated with that. My request this evening is to add exemptions to what you just approved, in that you guys opened up the pre-app process about midsummer based on the risks of the moratorium. Nobody was aware any risks would be associated with development regs getting changed, and so many of us moved forward at risk associated around the moratorium if it would get lifted or not come October. And so when these were approved, that pretty much threw everything out the door. If you had a pre-app, if you had filed a pre-app and you were waiting for your meeting, all that just completely went out the door. And I would tell you, as a land developer, it takes many, many months, even just to get to that point, to set up a pre-app with the city and working with landowners. What I am asking for here this evening is no different than what you guys did a year ago when you put the moratorium in place via emergency, and then came back and realized the right thing to do was to add an exemption for those who had pre-apps prior to that moratorium being lifted. I think it was 6 months. So again, you're all good people. I know you, I've watched you for the last year. I've gotten to know you, whether in these chambers or outside of these chambers. I believe you'll do the right thing and at least add these exemptions right now while we work through with staff and ultimately counsel these new interim development regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Jenkins, excuse me.
Hi, Council. My name is Christy Jenkins. I'm at 2322 48th Avenue Southeast in Sammamish. I've been a resident for 32 years here in the city of Sammamish and have seen a lot of growth and changes in development here. I was here, like Todd, 2 weeks ago, and I was very frustrated the day after with how the development regulations were voted into place, and I voiced my concerns to you guys in an email. But the reason I'm here tonight is because you asked for some real-life examples, and I think that's what a public forum is about. Real-life examples of how this affects real people. And I'm also a real estate broker, and I've worked in the city of Sammamish with buyers and sellers for the last 15 years. These are my neighbors, these are my friends, these are my clients. I'm under contract with several of them right now, and I want to give you a couple of examples of how these regulations changed the outcome of their retirement, their kids' college education, everything that they've been saving for, many of them for decades, while the equity built on their land, and they were given an opportunity by a developer to purchase that land to afford to move on to their next stages in life. Land that is between 0.91 and 0.94 acres, zoned R4. Under current regs, those would be four plats per the homeowner. You take that now that you've put in these regulations that do not allow us to round up, and so these .91 and .94, which previously would have been allowed to have rounded up to an acre, are now 3 lots. Then you take into consideration the setbacks, the driveways, the private easements, all of that that were all put into place 2 weeks ago. And now with the stroke of a pen, with what you guys decided 2 weeks ago, you've now got 2 lots. 2 lots on nearly an acre, zoned R4, for people that were into contract under certain expectations that there may be some changes, but certainly not changes that would devalue their property by 25 to 50%. This has nothing to do with the environmental climate, the political climate, who's president. This has everything to do with changing of regulations that were really unexpected, and voting those in 2 weeks ago was not an emergency. You guys could have easily gone over the plan, the proposal that was drafted, put it into consideration, let people think about it, give it to the community to consider. There's a lot of different ways that that could have been approached. I don't think that it was in the best interest of the community, the way that it was handled. I think, just as Todd said, a lot of people left under very different pretenses than if they would have stayed for the extra hour, they would have understood leaving. And so I just wanted to give you an example of how these regulations are affecting members of the city of Sammamish, people who live and work here, who are expecting something very different than what happened. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council?
Hi, my name's Tamara Takashima. I live at 2315 248th Avenue Southeast, and I wish my husband was up here talking because I'm not very good at it. So please be patient. The moratorium, I was told, originally was supposed to have been in September. Then it got changed to October. I was fine with that. We were supposed to close next November on our property being sold to Murray Franklin and signed prior to the moratorium being over. I'm unhappy with the changes. I don't think it's an emergency either. You put in an emergency moratorium. I don't see where the emergency is. You put a lot of money into making this a commons. Okay, well, if you think of it as a city commons, follow through. It's not just here. It's not just across the street. It follows to the high school and further out. Yeah, you have 4 parks here. You've got Beaver Lake. I'm real close to Beaver Lake. I walk there every day. If you want to address issues, I've got lots of them. People honking at me because I'm crossing the street with my dog and there's no crosswalk. They yell at me saying there's no crosswalk, that it's not a crosswalk. But I was told in an email that it is a crosswalk. So why am I putting my life at risk? Because I still like to walk. I like the neighborhood. We've lived in Sammamish for 15 years. I have a son who's 22. He still has to live at home because he can't afford to go out and get an apartment. This area is way too expensive for the area. Go to Seattle, it's expensive. You go north, it might be less. You go south, it might be less, but you're still, I like Sammamish, I like the area, I want to stay here. And we were looking at a home, a different home, selling our property in the city of Sammamish, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to afford it. And my husband is retiring next year. This was in our plans. This was going to move us along those plans. Now I'm not sure what's going to happen. So please consider what you're doing to the public prior to setting any regulations in. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the public, or the council, excuse me? Okay. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment. Next, we have consent calendar. Pull my agenda back up here. Whoops. Okay. Are there any changes to the consent calendar? Okay.
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. By a vote of 7-0, the consent calendar is approved. Deputy Mayor Miranda, do you have something? Oh, nope, okay. Okay, next we have presentations. We have the 2019-2020 Human Services Grant Funding. Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the city has been awarding human services grants since 2001. In 2017, the council created a 7-member Human Services Council. They have been, the 2019-2020 was the first cycle in which they have reviewed these grants to bring those to you. And they have been working for the last 6 months evaluating over 72 grants. And tonight you have Mr. Tom Ellers and Mr. Larry Wright here, who is going to present to you their recommendations for these grants.
Thank you very much. I would be Tom Ehlers. This is Larry Wright. We are the chair and co-chair or vice chair of the Human Services Commission. We have been at this for quite a while now, and we actually were both on the task force as well. Before I get started with the actual presentation, I wanted to acknowledge Joyce Bottenberg and CJ Keller, who are also on the commission, so thank you both for being here. And I also did want to take a moment to have a special acknowledgement to our staff that have been working with us. Mike and Rita have been really, really helpful and really just priceless as we've worked through all of the grants and we've discerned on the best approach, leveraging heavily, as you'll hear in a minute, the Human Services Needs Assessment, but I did want to acknowledge the great work you guys have done, so thank you. So tonight, we're going to give you just a quick background in context. You'll recall about 6 months ago or so, 9 months ago, we actually were here presenting the needs assessment. And what came out of that was some pretty stark learning about what the needs of the city of Sammamish are in the 5 areas that we recommended focusing on and that you ultimately approved that body of work. Tonight, what Larry and I will be doing is kind of tag teaming. I'll be setting some of the background. Our purpose here is to present and request your approval for our recommendation for the 2019-2020 grant recommendations. We're going to break it up 3 ways. One is quickly summarize the learning from the Human Services Needs Assessment. We'll review the process because we think it's important for you to understand the process of discernment we did go through as a commission to get to our unanimous recommendation, and then we'll go more deeply into the recommendation itself. Really quickly, I wanted to make sure you're familiar with this wonderful, bright-looking group of people who are the commissioners that you all put in place a little while ago. And as a quick background for the next slide, it's really, for us, been quite impressive in terms of the scope of experience that you were able to put in place on this commission. And we took the opportunity just to bold some of the ones that jumped out, but those are simply bullet points from the various backgrounds of the 7 commissioners. And speaking as the chair, I would have to say it's a humbling experience to work with such a established group, and the city of Sammamish has been quite lucky, I think, to go ahead and have that group. So we feel good about what we've been able to bring forward, and we thank you for pulling us together the way you have. So with that as background, wanted to provide some context. This next slide will probably get your heads nodding a little bit, but it's a quick reminder that the city of Sammamish has gone through incredible change. If anything, it seems like it's been accelerating, right? But some of the key points, of course, we added Klahani, and that brought in another set of human service considerations. Of course, our population, our foreign-born population, is increasing, and that is a great thing. Helps diversity, helps us all to learn more about the tapestry and fabric of life, but that also brings considerations relative to human service needs. Our senior population is aging right in front of us, and it's one of those slow, it really is day by day, but over time, our population has been, senior population is growing, and with that bring certain considerations that we need to think ahead and be ready for. Most households, of course, this is a family community, and it's a wonderful community. Most households do have children, and what that means is pressures on kids growing up that I'll comment on in just a second, but they are very much there under the surface, and that's also what a good human services plan would be seeking to address. And then finally, this was learning for me, and of course, housing affordability, we all know about that, but that actually puts pressure underneath in terms of affordability and insecurities around food or paying the utilities or anything else there might be there. And then finally, just as a reminder, the city of Sammamish relies very much on providers, the grantees, the organizations that we fund. We very much rely on them for human services. We don't have an established deep human services effort, and that's not a bad thing at all, because you could argue we rely on the experts to do what they do, but we do need to play our role, and that is largely through supporting them, learning from them, helping them understand the city of Sammamish, but also coming forward with grants and money to help them do their jobs. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of where we are. The question is, how do we even know what to do? How do we determine the human services needs of the community? The next slide really goes right to our needs assessment. We went out and we actually looked at both best practices and census learning from what was broadly available, but then we interviewed a number of our own citizens. We went to community events, we did a survey, and we identified the needs of the community, and we also identified the gaps. And through that, we were able to identify those focus areas, but also service gaps that really we need to focus on. So as a reminder, there are actually 5 areas or 5 buckets that are of critical importance to all of us here and the citizens of Sammamish. The first is, I acknowledge the gentleman talking about domestic violence. The simple fact is, these statistics come right out of the needs assessment, and for every statistic up there, there are many, many more in that needs study that tease out somewhat more each of these areas. But 27% of women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. The reality is, there's no reason to believe the city of Sammamish is immune or is not having, at least on a par with the average city, issues with domestic violence. The issue there, it's under the surface. It's very difficult to get people to step forward, but we know it's there and it's largely unaddressed at this point. So that's one of our primary areas. And what that means is this is where we would encourage you to invest the few dollars we do have. So domestic violence is one. Basic needs. It's interesting, people sometimes go to affluent community. Well, sometimes that affluence puts pressure on being able to meet even basic requirements, but yet there is a relatively large percent of our population that would be considered living at 300% or below the poverty, 300% of the poverty line. That's about 9% of our homeowners. And what that really means is we have people barely making it by, and they have needs for basic needs that we need to support, food banks and the like, to meet those needs. And you'll hear more about that in a second. Finally, the third one here is, I mentioned seniors. 40% of our residents who are over age 75 have a disability. It's going to continue to grow, so we need to be ready for that. So those are 3 of the 5. The next 2, as a reminder, is we identified the area of cultural inclusion. It's actually a very cool thing to see the diversity within Sammamish continue to grow, but that carries certain responsibilities and issues with it, like how do new residents even understand how to navigate through Sammamish? How do we get the best of all the cultures to work together? So cultural inclusion is critical. And then finally, mental wellness. We put one statistic up there, which I still honestly cannot believe every time I read it, but 21% of Sammamish teens have considered suicide in the last year. That is just, it will take your breath away. There are many other statistics we could have brought forward around that as well. 77% of our teens feel anxious over the last 2 weeks. Anxiety leads to self-harm ideation sometimes, that kind of thing. So, and just the simple pressure that we have in our community have identified mental wellness as an area we must address, and that is also part of what you're hearing the recommendation is tonight. So with those 5, this is simply a summary. There wasn't anything new there, just putting it in front of you. What I wanted to do is review quickly how we went about this. As was said earlier, we got a lot of interest, and we received 72 grants that were applied for funding for our scarce dollars. A total of almost $600,000 was requested. That's up about 80% versus the last cycle. I think that also shows the need is growing and our partner organizations are identifying more need. And then the total budget right now is about $250,000, $249,000. If that's all we had, we would only be able to meet 42% of the grant requests. So that's kind of the context where the need is great, and the simple fact is we can't fund everything. In fact, that was part of the work of the commission, that you really couldn't say yes to everyone. So the mindset we had was prioritize based on the needs assessment, and then rely on that along with our own discernment to identify where we wanted to place our investments. The grant review process, I won't go down each one of these, but basically applications were submitted, we did the staff checks for completeness, we did the review, we discerned, we voted, we debated, and then we ultimately came forward with our recommendation tonight to the council. So one thing we did do that I think you'll find some comfort in is to ensure that there was consistency across each of the discernments, we came up with a scorecard. And we identified 5 areas you see there that matter most. So at the end of the day, you want to be a good regional player, it's true, but you also want to make sure you're impacting Sammamish. Is this a need Sammamish has? And are we really, truly focusing on that? So what are the needs in Sammamish? Is it a system that actually we can believe in? Is it accessible to everyone? What's the true impact, service units and outcomes, and then how do they manage their budget? So those are the 5 areas that our scorecard that we used, basically identified for us to score each grant on. So the final component here is we got 72 grants. Each grant is about 20 to 25 pages. So the way we tackled this problem was we broke up into 3 subgroups and divided up the grants, and each of the subgroups then took their grants and went deep on it. Each individual filled out a scorecard, and then they debated as a subgroup, and then they came back to the commission and made recommendations, and it was through that process of literally voting on every grant that we came up with where we netted out right now. So it was a go deep, debate it, state your case, and then vote, and then move forward. Not unlike, I'm sure, how you guys operate. So the issue we came up with was the $249,000 in the budget wasn't as much as we felt we found merit and true need out there. And so we are making a recommendation tonight a bit higher than the 249. We'll go through some of that in a second. But the fact is, the 249 was carried over from, I think, a budget a couple of years ago. And if you really look at the need that's there, it's well above 249. But we're making a recommendation tonight to increase that 249 by about $76,000, and we'll show how that breaks out. And that's a unanimous recommendation from your Human Services Commission. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Larry, and he's going to walk through in broad strokes how we net it out in terms of those 5 buckets, and then we can certainly be open to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Council. So as Tom noted, he talked us through the process of how we came to these recommendations. I'm going to actually go through in some detail with the recommendations themselves. So we begin with really what was a framework that emerged, and Tom touched on a couple of them, but I think they're worth noting because they really did help us decide on not only the base recommendation, but the request for an additional funding. So at its core, what we hope to do is create a focus on prevention versus a reactive approach for the city in terms of human services, addressing issues upstream before they become too large for our own capacity to address them downstream. As Tom noted, one of the unique elements of our model here in Sammamish is that we don't ourselves provide human services. We rely on civic and other government agencies to provide those services. And that's really not the point of this presentation tonight, but it really does frame how we do our work. A couple of the other elements that emerged was that sense of growth, and again, that goes back to this notion of if we get in front of this early enough and start making investments, calibrating supply and demand for human services, we think we'll be in a much better place further down the line when inevitably there is the next recession or whatever the case may be. So one thing that really jumped out to us, and I've been a resident of Sammamish since '87, and you know, I went to school in Bellevue. I've always been on the east side, but the extent to which we underinvest versus peer cities really kind of shocked me, and I think that also informed what we were doing. And I say that because as you look across what's happened in the last 30-odd years on the east side, you see cities going in different directions. And I think we're at a unique inflection point here in Sammamish where we can make some decisions that 20 years, 25 years down the line, people will look back and say that was a critical one in terms of human services. So as Tom was noting, we did in fact have a needs assessment, but this was also part of something broader. This was an investment by the city. The city brought on a staff member. The city brought on the forerunner of the Human Services Commission, the task force, and then formalized, codified that in a commission. All of that was indicating that we are going deeper. And so we took all of those things into consideration as we made these recommendations. So with that said, the recommendation itself is we are recommending $325,445 in grant funding for 2019-2020. That is $240,000, which was a maintenance level, which had really been our charge, and saying we think that we need to do $76,445 in additional funding. That 325, again, is a percentage of what the overall ask was. It's important to note that overall ask increased by 79% over previous cycles. You can look at that as one of two ways. You can look at that as, boy, there's an increased demand for services and we need more money, and that's likely the case. But you can also turn that around and see it as an opportunity. It is the providers themselves that are asking for this, so it is a unique opportunity to invest in that supply to provide those services down the line. And that's how we're looking at this. So if you can go to the next slide. How it breaks down. Tom gave you some of the 5 buckets and a little sense of what those buckets meant.
Larry, is this breakdown on the 279?
This is the breakdown on the 325.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So, and to that question, I believe the 249 in large part, there may be some variations, but the big buckets still remain. So, so the additional 76 didn't throw it completely out of whack.
Thank you.
It was a growth across. So the basic needs in the mental wellness, those are the ones, again, I think that as we reviewed these individually for merit, as we viewed them through the lens of how this impacts Sammamish citizens, but also as we viewed this through the lens of what investments can we make today that will serve us well in the future, those were the ones that jumped out. Cultural inclusion, seniors, domestic violence. I think if you asked any of us that reviewed these, we would have added another 100,000. But we do believe in fiscal responsibility, and this was a surgical, if I can say, recommendation. We really went through with a fine-tooth comb and said, boy, it'd be great if we had that. But is that serving Sammamish residents now? Is it laying a groundwork to serve Sammamish residents in the future? Those are some of the guiding factors. If you can go to the next slide, again, we referenced kind of our place on the broader east side. We're currently less than 40% below, 40% of our nearest neighbor, which is Issaquah, 40% of Kirkland, 35% of Redmond, 33% of Redmond. I'm sorry, because we're not going to ask for a little bit more. We hopefully get up to about 33% of Redmond. Again, each one of these has a slightly different model of how they provide human services. Context drives how we do these things. Bellevue is a very different place than Sammamish in some ways. Bellevue has sought to make investments in their human services that dwarf what we've made. But Bellevue also is in some ways similar to who we are, in that it is a diverse place that continues to grow, and they recognize that growth in large part depends on investments they make to make sure that the citizens of their community are taken care of. I think we're looking to make a similar investment.
Larry, quick question. Are the cities that you've listed here of the same model? Do they have direct service providers models? Are these cities, tell me how they differ from us in the way they deliver services?
And I'll ask Rita to weigh in. I believe Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland do have staff that's actually engaged. I think Issaquah is closer to ours, but I'll ask Rita.
As far as actually providing directly to human services, the City of Redmond provides direct human services in the way of an outreach homelessness officer, and the City of Mercer Island, that's not listed there, actually directly provides all youth mental health services. So they're a direct provider as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so as a follow-on to that, so for the cities that have some of those direct services, this is per capita grant funding. So are those funds included here, or would that be in addition to? So where they have some staff on hand, they're actually spending more per capita on human services?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so as far as like staffing goes, we are the leanest out of all the cities.
But I guess what I'm asking is if Redmond provides direct services in some areas, is this $1741 per capita just the grant funding to the service providers, or does that $1741 include their staff as well?
That's just the grant funding.
So that means that on a per capita basis, they spend even more for their citizens in total.
Yeah.
They're
Thank you.
expensive.
Yeah, that doesn't.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's important. That's a good distinction. Thank you. Any other questions on that? So taking that as a jumping off point, you can see where this puts us with the base recommendation and additional requests. That brings us up to $5.13 per capita, which again, against Issaquah at $10, Kirkland at $10.36, Redmond at $17, and Bellevue at $24.89. It's still significantly behind our peers, but it is a good first step towards bringing us in calibration with supply and demand for these services. So, in summary, we took the charge quite seriously to work with the maintenance level funding of $249,000 per year. We chose to unanimously recommend that the council approve an additional $76,445 per year for the grant programming. We believe that that additional funding will help ensure that these resources are prioritized for driving a real and noticeable impact for the citizens of Sammamish today and in the future. And we believe that that manifests itself as moving towards a prevention mindset versus a reactive crisis one. And so the final recommendation is for $325,445 for the next grant cycle. And I believe you have a full set of how those grants play out. So I'd be glad to answer any questions or.
Mr. City Manager, did you have something or no? No? Okay, your light's on. I just want to make sure. And Councilmember Valderrama. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Ritchie.
One of those rare times.
Can you go back a couple slides about the per capita by city? Yeah, that one, thank you. Can you tell me, and I maybe not be right off the top of your head, but we have a certain, our biennial budget. Can you tell me, maybe not now, maybe later, how much of the $325,000 grant that you're requesting or budget that you're requesting from us, what is that of our total biennial budget versus what are the other cities' percentage of their budgets? I mean, I know we're low, but I mean, do they have huge budgets? Bellevue's budget's probably, God knows, you know what I mean? I'm curious as to where we are weighted, what chunk of our human services, what are we putting in? I get peer-to-peer, it's different, but
Sure.
What's the difference to us based on our budget?
I'll let staff comment on it, but I joked when we were putting this together from my work when I did state budgets that we would refer to this as budget dust. That quite honestly, the amount is so small compared to the overall
Right.
budget that it has a nominal impact on the budget writ large, particularly the additional ask.
It's a fair question, and I know with this one, and I'll defer to Rita, and if we don't have that number, we can absolutely get you. What you're asking about is a % of the total. How do we do versus our peer sisters or peer cities? Issaquah, happened to talk to the Issaquah mayor a couple weeks ago, and they have locked in $10 per capita per person. So as they grow, they just have a formula that goes with that. That doesn't answer your specific question, but they've identified a level that they're comfortable with, and they just, and most cities do find that, and that's actually where we'd like to get
Yeah.
moving forward.
No, I agree. I think that's the right model in my mind, at least going forward. But I'd be interested to, just to figure out where that is. Maybe Rita can tell us.
Can you comment on that?
I have a rough estimate for Sammamish specifically. I don't have the numbers for other cities, but as a percent of our general fund, the $325,000 would represent approximately 0.6 to 0.7% of the general fund budget.
And that's not the total budget, that's just the general fund.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Councilmember Ross.
Thank you for the presentation. Many years ago, one of my first city involvements was on the Kirkland Human Service Advisory Committee, so what you do is near and dear from my memories. I think you've done some great work here. I just want to ask a few questions on what you're looking at in your assessments. Are the contributions restricted for use?
You mean, yeah, so the way these are contracted for specific services. So each grant has a unique set of service hours or a service unit that then have to be quarterly reported on in order to receive a quarterly payment.
Can it be used to fund operations?
Typically, in something like this, there may be some overhead charge, but I don't think I saw anyone that was just, this goes to our general fund and we will do what we want with it. It is, we will have X number of mentors, X number of children will be mentored or something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay, and the YMCA has done a great job for our community. I was just, something that caught my eye is they're one of the few that got the full funding requested. What was the criteria and what's that money being used for?
So, well, I was on that subgroup, and that is all about mental wellness, particularly teen-oriented, and they actually put a portion of their own money that when they open YMCAs, they do pilot programs to understand what the impact might be, and then they demonstrate to a given community, and they can't always continue to afford it. So in this case, what they came forward and said was, we need extra money versus the last cycle to actually continue and actually grow total ability of our ability to particularly meet with teens for mental wealth or mental health counseling. So when we looked at that, we thought the bulk of that program was so critical based on the Health and Human Services assessment that said our teens are under duress in a way that you can't possibly overstate. And we believed in what the Y had already done. While it is a big number, we felt they had proven their mettle, and we thought it was a good investment for Sammamish.
So they're generating surpluses and doing very well. Are they able to use their own funds for this?
And that's, that's part of the challenge is that in nonprofit fundraising, most dollars you raise are restricted. And so while they may be doing well, my guess is they don't have, well, I know that they don't have funding for that specific job. So just to call it out, what Tom was referencing is the way the Y works, they have a program called an accelerator that is a separate Y. They go in, they make an investment in a community. They demonstrate that that's important, and then they ask the community to take it on. So here in Sammamish, as Tom was indicating, we have extremely high rates of anxiety among our young people, and we have high rates of suicidal ideation among our young people. So the Y actually stepped up and said, well, we're going to do something. We actually don't have enough providers here in Sammamish to work. A lot of these are in Issaquah and outside of Sammamish. And so, again, we felt that not only did that deserve funding today, but that was an investment that we need to keep that additional bandwidth, that bench strength here in Sammamish, and so we funded it at the level requested.
Okay, because basically my concern is from the Y contract perspective, they're not to be subsidized by taxpayers, and it's fairly clear, and I want to make sure that we're not directing important funds to the Y unnecessarily that could be used for the other very worthy organizations.
Yeah, and that's a good question, and I'm going to comment, I'm going to take off my commission hat and comment myself in my own profession, which is I work with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation, and so I work with a lot of the nonprofits and a lot of the schools here in the district and in Sammamish. And one of the things I know in speaking with parents and speaking with schools is this is one of the most pronounced challenges we're facing right now with our young people, and that there simply are not enough resources. People are not sure where to turn. People are calling 911 for suicidal ideation because there aren't enough assets here. And so, I really saw it as an example of the city investing in the community center and them repaying that by saying we're going to bring this up, and that the city then reciprocates as well.
And if I can, Chris, to your point, we will go back and make sure we're not in violation of the agreement. We were not aware of that, and my sense is this is its own lane, but and that's how we evaluated it. But we'll want to make sure we reconcile it to the overall city contract.
Yeah,
As why.
I absolutely don't question the need. I just question the utilization of our very low human service budget. And if it's already being funded through surpluses in the Y, and they can use the money in the surpluses or in their operating or otherwise, that makes a lot of sense to really look at it carefully.
Yeah, we'll want to make sure it's not in conflict with what the city agreement is, from what I'm hearing. So.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, thank you again for the presentation, the work that you've put in, and recognition and identification of critical needs. Couple of questions is, in all of these that you're doing, you had talked about the scorecard, and traditionally we've always looked at how they're servicing our community of Sammamish. Is 100% of these funds, or are 100% of these funds going to be utilized in Sammamish? Because that was always a concern that past councils have had, is that we would be funding other cities who are different types of cities and have more needs than ours, and consequently.
Well, I think there's two ways to look at that. So again, going back to our model, which is contracting out for services. If you look at Sammamish, we actually do not grow we don't grow these nonprofit organizations here. There are a limited number. On the broader east side, we have them, right? And so the model itself is we're calling for an organization that might be the Issaquah Food Bank.
Exactly, or Redmond, but they know the percentages that are Sammamish residents that are
So
coming.
in the service unit, they need to tell us how many Sammamish residents they're going to serve.
That's correct, yeah.
And we base our grant on that, but also understanding that it does contribute to the overall well-being of the organization writ large. We try to look at it we need these organizations to be around in the future. They're certainly serving a percentage of our population, but if we only said, hey, if you don't serve X number, we're not going to invest in you, I think there was a sense that we might have short-term gain and give up a long-term benefit by not having these folks around in the future. But to answer your question concisely, yeah, when you have a contract, you have to say, this is in the proposal, this is how many Sammamish residents, and we looked at the dollar amount per Sammamish residents. And so a lot of them we pulled back for that reason. We said, this is great, but you're only serving a handful of Sammamish residents. We can't, in good conscience, provide you with that much funding.
Oh yeah, in the past we've had requests for vehicles that they were going to purchase, but really it was minimal time here, and it was going to be in the other neighboring cities. And the second one is, we've never wanted to race to match the people in the other cities for dollar, neither in parks or in any a different type of city and different service. So going to $5 or $3, that's always been something, as Melanie will tell you, that the council has been very reluctant to move those amounts that were given, and that's why you have the $10,000 caps that have been in place historically, that we're not a race to the top of that chart that we want to go into, but we do want to make sure that we service and that we prioritize, which brings me to the next question, is, did you break out, when you prioritized the 249,000, those are the most immediate needs, I assume, that we're talking about that go first. And then the $445, I assume that we're going to be getting a similar bang for the buck, because that's the advantage of having CJ, Joyce, and yourselves on there, is because you know these organizations. And some of these organizations, a dollar doesn't go as far in serving Sammamish. And so what I'd like to get, since we don't have the scorecards in front of us, an assurance that that 76,445 is as critical as the 249 to look, or that you can bring us that information to show it to us to go through, because we are facing constraints and everybody wants more money, whether it's the Arts Commission, the Parks Department, the fields, everything wants more. And we are servicing, all of them are critical to our city's well-being.
I mean, so excellent points. The way we got to the 325 was actually from where do we find value in the existing grant? So we actually we started by saying, I'm not putting a constraint on us. I want to understand what is of value to the city of Sammamish, and we relied heavily on the scorecard, and then we debated spiritedly to find a place where we said, before we even go to the 249 we have, how much, if someone said we didn't have a constraint, what do we think is a good investment for the city of Sammamish? And that criteria is found in the scorecard, points of impact, et cetera, et cetera. That came to 325. So everything else was pushed aside. A lot of money was just shoved aside. Some grants were actually just pushed aside themselves. And then we put a pressure test that said if we have to, because we thought our credibility was bringing you the budget, but also telling you what we thought. So it really was 249 was the most critical, but the 325 absolutely is of great value and will impact our citizens. Or put another way, if we don't get the 325, we will feel underfunded relative to the value we found in all the grants, if that helps. And the other thing is, while you would like to say every dime, two quick comments. One is, sometimes by funding an organization, you then open the door to have an opportunity to work with them so they can then get to know Sammamish more. And it's over time that we can see building that impact even more so. And in some cases, domestic violence is an example where a Sammamish resident actually wouldn't participate likely in a domestic violence safe haven house or something here. They would likely go to another community because of the nature of it. So it's not always as directed, but our bias was absolutely to get the most impact from the city of Sammamish. And it really was at 325 we said this is what we believe is the best value. Everything else is pushed aside.
Thank you, Tom.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Near and dear to my heart, human services. One thing I'm a little concerned about, however, is what's currently up on the slide is the per capita grant funding. And I think it might be a little misleading if you don't look at what we just looked at last week, the general fund revenues per capita. See how much lower we are than all these other peer companies? Rough numbers, 724 per capita versus 1,300, roughly 2 to 1. So without taking that into account, what I'm wondering is what percentage of our per capita income is being spent as opposed to what percentage of each of our peers are spending versus just a pure dollar amount. And another way of looking at that would be how much per household are we funding human services versus our peers? Because I don't think the per capita, when they're doing twice as much revenue as we are, it doesn't show the full picture of what we're asking our citizens to do and support. Do we have those? Probably don't have those percentages, I presume, right? I'd really like to see that because I think this is a little bit, while interesting, but without this extra information, it may be a little misleading.
Yeah, and this is super helpful because it allows us to look through the lens that you look at relative to the entire budget. This is just one data point, and in a way, we're almost spending more time on it than we meant, which was, this is a nice comment about peer, but I don't care as much as I care about what is needed for the citizens of Sammamish. So the investment per household might actually be a better metric, which we could look at. There's no reason to think, say, the city of Sammamish is particularly different on the human needs area as, say, certainly Issaquah. I mean, there are differences, I know. But those kinds of metrics, to get a different way of looking at it, we can certainly work with you on that.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm just always struck when I think that we have 4,400 people in the city who are living in severe poverty. And, you know, that means you've got potentially kids going to bed without dinner in the city of Sammamish. Just doing some rough numbers, you know, that means we also, with the 21% of teens considering suicide, really quick, rough calculation, that's at least 4,000 teens in the city of Sammamish are considering suicide each year. 27% of the women in our city may be experiencing domestic violence. What was your other statistic? 40% of people over 75 with a disability who will need help. So those just are very striking. You're asking the additional 76,000 is a 30% increase over the base budget, but as you pointed out, that base budget is a base budget from several years ago. So do we know how much of an increase that really is when you adjust it for both inflation and for the growth in our population? Because it seems like this number of 393 per capita would be going down over time, right? If 249 stayed stable, we're actually spending less year over year on our citizens. And from a teen perspective, we talk about the teens considering suicide, but you didn't even mention the number of teens who have who are drinking or using drugs, right? And so I know that is also a big concern. So it would be interesting to know what that increase really is after you deduct the inflation and the population growth. If we kept the per capita spending the same as in previous years, is it really even much of an increase at all?
Reducing your effectiveness.
And then I guess, you know, there have been a lot of ways people are kind of looking at the numbers, and I think that's all very interesting. I guess for me, my real question is, are we funding enough services to meet the needs of all of those people we just identified? So it's great when we look at it on a per capita basis, but, you know, we're identifying, you know, I just identified between the teens and those considering suicide and those in severe poverty, that's over 8,000 people right there. And if you look at the amount that we're spending, we're not even talking about, I mean, we're talking about a very small dollar figure to help. I mean, not even $100, you know, we're talking about, what, $50 a person. That, you know, from a counseling perspective, if you have a teen considering suicide that needs to go into counseling, that's not even one therapy session, right? So I guess that would be one way I would ask is this even enough to address those who are in extreme need in our city right now?
So I think on behalf of the commission, the short answer there would be no, we don't think so. But what we do think is it's an important path to allow us to move forward on. And what the city of Sammamish created a task force and a commission. The commission now is charged with, one, identifying how much we need, but also learning as we go along. So the short answer is, you know, I could make an argument, and some may disagree, but if we save one teen from doing something terrible to themselves, it's worth $325,000, you know.
Right.
So,
what's the value of a life?
And it's over time, the value of a commission, one of the reasons we set up the commission was you do have that time and that value, that the continual improvement in learning. So we will learn as we go along. I think it's the key answer is, what do we need, or the key question is, what does the city of Sammamish need, not so much what our peer sisters might be doing.
Right. That's kind of what I'm getting at, is what do we, you know, for the number of people who have urgent, like you said, you know, kind of I'm not even talking about the prevention piece that you mentioned. I'm talking about the people who are already in crisis. So you've already got, you know, somewhere between 8 and 10,000, you easily have 10,000 people if you throw in domestic violence, people who are suffering from domestic violence. So we easily have at least, you know, 10,000 people who are in crisis, and we're talking about, you know, $325,000. That seems like a fairly small number to address life-threatening crises. I mean, we're not just talking about, I had a bad hair day. We're talking about life-threatening crises. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. I think this is great. I think it is a step in the right direction. I would love to see us make sure that we we are an amazing community, and I think that we should make sure that we do have enough services here, and that we have enough money to make sure that people are aware of those services and know how to get those services, because part of the funding needs to not be just making sure those services are there, but that people know how to get them when they need them. And communications can be expensive. So I just want to make sure, because I agree. I mean, if we can save, one child from, malnutrition, if we can save, one teen from suicide, if we can save one woman from and it's probably not a woman, right? If more than half of our households have children, we're not talking about saving a woman from domestic violence. We're talking about saving a woman and her children from a domestic violence situation. So thank you for your service. Thank you for this work, and carry on. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Ross.
Yeah, I think it's terrific what the city's doing, and we've got to have that careful balance. I like the model where we're supporting our delivery of service through those who know how to deliver it, through the not-for-profits. It's outstanding. We've got to be careful we don't deter the generosity of our public from contributing to the not-for-profits. For example, I just went to Livewire breakfast recently, and I'll tell you, I came in with a number in mind for contribution. After I heard the woman's story, I added 50% of what I was going to give. And it's just wonderful, the not-for-profits. I'd love to see the city bang the drums and really encourage people to get out and help all these wonderful service deliveries. All those people you see on that list, they need not just the city's help, they need all of our help. And I'd hope we can generate some of the excitement. And the market does drive needs through the not-for-profits. Those that are performing services year after year means they are fulfilling a need. And those are the ones we really got to pay attention to help them. So bravo to you for all the work you're doing through the commission. And I do also encourage the public to get excited about helping our communities.
Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Moran.
Well, I absolutely have to, again, repeating exactly what Councilmember Ross said. Going to the breakfast a couple of weeks ago for the food bank for Issaquah, and the excitement that was there, and the the outreach from the public that that has grown dramatically in the last couple of years with that breakfast. So. I do think the city should, and I think you guys have done a fabulous job. I think the money that you have put out is money well spent. I think you were very thoughtful in your choices. I thank you for the time that you've spent. I think you did a very good job. And I think we are not, at least I am not looking to be into this as the business of running these programs. So I think you did a great job in picking those for us. And and I'm not trying to match what our neighbors put in, but we do certainly want to help them where we're able. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I don't see any more questions up here. Did you have more slides, or is this the end of the deck?
This is the end of our formal festivities.
Great. I think we'll turn it over to council then to consider this. Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the recommendations from the Human Services Commission and grant their funding of $325,445 for fiscal year 2019-20.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there more discussion? Councilmember Ritchie, did you want to speak to your motion?
I would only say that the work that the council or that the commission put in is exactly the kind of detailed community investment that we've asked them to do. I don't think this is a huge ask. It's a targeted surgical ask. And I think it's completely appropriate that we make this move now, given how much our community has grown and given the clear needs that were outlined as part of the information gathering that the commission put together. So I think it's high time that we reinvest in our community. And frankly, this is one of the things I got on this council to do.
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, again, thanks for the work. I think you guys are doing what we ask you to do. when I got involved with this 2.5 years ago, when I first came on the council, it was an important part of what I wanted to do. And I learned a lot of how the process was and who the people asking for grants are and everything else. And it's like, doggone it, I want to do it all. We all want to do what we can, and especially if we have the money to do it, let's go ahead and do it. But I have the same thing with my budget at home. I can't do it all. I can never do everything I want to do. I did, however, increase the budget significantly 2.5 years ago, or as part of council. The decision was that we increased this significantly what we were giving to Arch for the housing from about like tenfold, 10,000 to 100,000. So that was a big, big increase just 2 years ago. I did also learn that you can't just focus only on Sammamish because we don't have enough of those services, and we have to be willing and thinking about contributing to those outside who are providing services to our citizens. And I understand that as a key point. And frankly, I was one of the proponents to put the commission together so I could get out of the job. So I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I think this is a premature increase, and I think we need to stick with the budget with where we're at, based on what I said as far as I don't think the per capita grant funding is the full picture. I think if we do increase our funding, we can hopefully do more on a city basis for the human services. And I kind of like the idea that maybe at some point we increase it and maybe have an automatic increase. And I think there was something floated out about $1 per capita or $1 per household that increases with growth. So you get an automatic increase over the years as well, because I think it is something versus having it flat and it kind of going down on a per capita basis when it stays flat and everything. But boy, there's a lot of things we want to do here at the city, and I want to do more than what you're asking, but I just don't think this is the right time.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so if I do quick math again, it looks like you guys are asking for about 55% of what was requested. So we're not actually doing it all. We're doing about half of what was requested. I'd also like to, at least from my perspective, it's my understanding that the first and foremost order of local government is public safety. And it seems to me that, again, looking at the number of people in our city who are in crisis, that many of these services, given that, 39% are for basic needs, right? That a lot of that actually speaks to, in a lot of respects, safety, right? If people are in danger of with life-threatening issues or not having their basic needs met, that's not a safe environment. So I appreciate that we do have a lot of requests on us as a council. Not to do too many comparisons, but I think we approved $65,000 to do an architectural study on a historical site, which I think was a fair thing for us to do. So you're only asking for a little bit more than that to meet people's basic needs. So I think it's more than a reasonable request. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have any more lights on, so I'll go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor of the requested funding level, which I don't remember what it is because it's not right up there.
325, 445.
Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 6-1, it will pass. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing to consider an ordinance to amend the capital facilities element of the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan. Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, this was a subject of one of the subjects of your study session last evening. This action dates back to 2017, and Mr. Thomas is here and will present this item to you and see if you have any questions in regards to this.
I think so. Good evening, council. Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I am Mr. Thomas. Joining me again is Mr. Goodman, and Mr. Goodman is so excited about this item tonight, he invited his wife to the meeting tonight, and she's out in the lobby. So Actually,
She's my ride.
She's the ride. So.
Good.
So this will be very brief to allow you to complete the public hearing this evening. You actually had a full, in relative terms, work session on this last evening. Again, a comprehensive plan amendment that was docketed last year to provide a dynamic reference to the annually adopted capital facilities plans and corresponding impact fees for our 3 school districts that have jurisdiction within the Sammamish city limits. So this item here this evening, the public hearing, should you be so inclined after completing the public hearing to move this item forward, we'll be seeking a motion, cue it up, to have you send this item to essentially the end of the year for the consolidated annual amendment of the comprehensive plan. And with that, unless there's any questions, I'll turn it back over to the mayor to open the public hearing.
Great. No questions. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I have Paul Stickney.
Good evening again, Council. My name is P. Paul Stickney. I'm at 22626 Northeast Inglewood Hill Road. I have a fairly short comment. Would suggest that you watch a Planning Commission hearing on this because I gave a comment at their meeting and then they had about a 15 or 20-minute conversation. And I support completely all the changes. However, in the past, it's been really cool to see all the specifics of the school districts that turning in student generation based on the type of structure. How many students come out of single-family homes? How many out of mixed-use horizontal? How many come out of row houses and the townhouses? And that information has been really interesting to watch over 5 or 6 years. And past years, city councils have had the same question Councilmember Hornish had last night about why is Lake Washington so much less than is Issaquah? Well, the thing I suggested, and the commission was right to not, pick this up. I suggested that the city keep track and have a link to how the student generation over time will change. And they said, that's a good idea, but not in the comp plan. So I just wanted to share that if we make these changes to the capital facility plan and make it sort of automatic every year, we lose touch a bit with how many students are being generated based on housing type, and I think that's real good information for all kinds of things. And I brought a copy of the Family Feud All-Star because the reason I show this is some people think that certain types of units will create a lot of student generation and other types won't. We should know what those are as a city from the school districts and learn what the number one answer is. There's always going to be exception to the rule, but all the planning we do on land use, et cetera, should go what is the median or average of how many students are generated by structure type. So that's comment.
Very good. Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council during this public hearing? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing, and I will turn it over to council for discussion and the motion that is very convenient on our screen here. Thank you. I appreciate that. Councilmember Stewart.
I move that we direct staff to include the proposed amendments to the capital facilities element of the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan in the consolidated amendment package to be considered by City Council in December.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Councilmember Stewart, did you want to? Oh, you turned your light off. Okay. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, frankly, listening to Mr. Stickley's discussion, it would be good if the schools provided it as an attachment for our review to see, so it doesn't have to be part of the comp plan, but something provided to the council, so annually that we do get an update and we don't take for granted what's taking place and provide that oversight. So I think that that would be a good thing to direct staff to provide to us. It's not part of the actual study per se, but you got an answer for us and your wife?
Only for myself. Each capital facilities plan includes a 5-year running list of all the new developments in all of the cities that the school district covers, and shows how many units were built and then how many students each one of those units generated per school. So those are already, for both single family and multifamily, so those are already included in the plans.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, the motion passes. Okay. Do we want to take a quick break? I know I do.
Well, it's not going to be so quick if you take a break.
Well, I'm not going anywhere but over there.
Yeah. 5 minutes?
No.
5 minutes.
On the treadmill? Yes. It's perfect. Yep.
Where did I see that? What show was that?
It was just a clip. Okay, let's get us back in gear here. We are moving on to council reports. First one is a discussion of the 2019 legislative priorities.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, your legislative committee met on September the 19th to discuss, and they met with your lobbyists as well as staff to discuss what you may want to focus on as in regards to your legislative priorities for this upcoming legislative session. If you look at your agenda bill, you have 2 exhibits. Exhibit 1 is the 2018 legislative priorities, and I believe the committee was, their thoughts are that that should remain part of your focus. I think they also discussed adding transportation to that list. And if you wish to do that, you might want to look at what projects, if any, that you would like to seek some funding for. And your lobbyists are recommending that you have 2 lists. A short list, which is your highest priorities, and then a longer list in case you get down to that level, but the chances of getting to the longer lists are probably a bit slimmer. They also suggested that those things that you really hope that you might find some funding for, that they be shovel ready. And if you have any that would have the ability to build partnerships within the region, those would probably be helpful as well. The second exhibit you have there are 2018 park legislative issues, and you may look at those as well. Anyhow, the discussion this evening is to develop those priorities. And again, if you wish to add transportation and you would like to think about projects that you might want funded, is to direct staff to kind of prepare that list and bring it back to you so you could work through that. I know your committee met for quite a while and talked about those, and all of them are here and can discuss their thoughts with you, and we'll be glad to entertain any questions that you have.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, so just a question. So I see like we have the Metro Monopoly Lift and the condominium liability reform. So those are things that affect us, but are things that we know other cities would like to see. In that same vein, I attended the K4C meeting today, which is the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, hence the 4C part. And they had a number of state asks that they were working on as well. So I don't know if that's something I should just throw out here, or is that something that I should just send to the legislative committee of things that they were trying to push at the state level, because it's just easier and more effective if they're statewide regulations than each city trying to enact different codes.
I think those I think those are the things that the lobbyists were talking about. If you have the opportunities, you may not want those on your list, but if you could partner with other cities, or at least add support to those things may still make their way through the legislature, and yet you haven't eaten up your list. So.
Okay. Because some of these would certainly have pretty big impacts on the environment, which I know is a pretty big priority for the folks here in Sammamish. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I would recommend that we put the transportation on. We've been holding everyone in all business for the last year based upon transportation. So I think we need to be able to look at getting the ask together. We would have to recognize that they are going to be looking, while we make the ask, for our contributions and what are we going to be investing in it to go forward. One of the cautions that I have on the bigger list, like on the climate or that, and it follows what the city manager was saying, is that you're going to have organizations like the Association of Washington Cities that every year makes their list, and you have to be careful not to dilute your items that our legislators are going to be focused on in trying to go after the greater good, because we're basically going to be getting a short bandwidth of time to get their attention, and they want to know what are they fighting for their constituents versus the overall state or regions that you'll have the King Counties and the Association of Washington Cities fight. So I would have that as an attachment in the background. And then if there's a coalition of a specific effort, for example, we could be talking about the Lake Sammamish water basin. That would be something that we could put up specifically with Bellevue, Redmond, and Kirkland to push together on. Thank you.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Okay, so when we built this list last year, I had some time to talk to several of the lobbyists that we interviewed, and several of our state legislators that represent Sammamish. We're lucky to have a total of 9 that represent different parts of our city. So we do have a significant voice in the state Senate and the state House that have a connection directly to Sammamish. What I'd like to see happen here is that we change the Metro Monopoly lifted, that M, to mobility, keeping with the SAM format. The M would be mobility in as much as we could assign a singular road project that we deem appropriate in the next period of time that is shovel ready. And we can go to our lobbyists, our representatives, and our electeds in Olympia and say, this is a specific road that has a specific need, and it may or may not be part of our concurrency plan. It may or may not be something that we have on our agenda right now as far as our TIP is concerned. But I think it's something, when we look at this list here, the culverts are specific to Sammamish. The double annexation, or the double tax, the park district areas, very specific to Sammamish. A specific road within Sammamish that we could go back to our lobbyists and say, what I assume will be a transportation package coming out of the Transportation Committee in the new session in January, February. I would assume there's going to be something coming out of that. I think we need to have a specific ask for Sammamish in there. My 2 cents, 228th all the way down, partnering with King County. Whether it's 3 or 5 lanes, that is our main corridor that we constantly have trouble with, and I'd like to see what we can do, partnering with King County to make that the thoroughfare that it needs to be for our 5,000 plus commuters going to Microsoft and points north every day. That's in Sammamish. It partners with King County. It is a need we know is there, and frankly, it is just so much more expensive than we've ever thought it would be, that it just seems to be just a bridge too far for us frequently. And it's just that one, do we make it 3, do we make it 5? God, do we really, all the things associated with it. I think it makes sense for us to, let's put a number behind that. This is a wish list. This is when we go to our state legislators and say, hey, state, we have a need. We have a specific geographic uniqueness about our city, and here's something you can do as a state legislature to make our commuters, our local businesses, our Microsoft better for our citizens. And I like to see what that looks like and see what their response is specifically related to the new session and the new transportation package coming up. That's the specificity that I think our lobbying team asked for.
Councilmember Hornish.
Actually, I like that idea, to be specific. And I still like the 3 thing, which is kind of the A-B list, I think, that the lobbyists were kind of recommending. So this, I think the SAM is our A list, is kind of, and now you have very specific, so I do like that. Just to comment on a few other of the proposals, the one I read about the proposed minimum density legislation, I kind of like that one too, but it's a function of metro connections, which I'm trying to figure out how that would play for us. Maybe it'd get us more metro. If we have to meet those minimum density, then we actually have to get metro here. Where right now we're so far on the fringes, we don't have that capability. So that could kind of lead us into that. Is that an A or a B? I think it's a B. It's something globally we can work at regionally. And then on the list on the back for the future consideration, liquor tax restoration, B, but it'd be nice to have, and I think everybody could join us. The one question I had, maybe somebody else knows the answer to this, and I didn't have time to research it. The marketplace fairness, I thought the federal government superseded this and have put something into place that's going to come out. Is anybody familiar with that?
I thought a number of states, Colorado began to actually enact it in state, and I thought Washington was looking at enacting something.
Well, that's what this is for Washington to do, but I thought it came out federally. I'll try to find something, but and I don't think it's in place yet, but I thought there was, no, it was a South Dakota, it was a Supreme Court case for South Dakota, I think, that says, yeah, you can do this now, but they haven't done anything yet. So it may kind of fix itself on a federal basis. Just a comment.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, no, it's been going back and forth. There are different senators in D.C. who are interpreting that law as should it be the one who ships or the person who receives on the tax money. And depending, if you're a big warehouse plant, you have a different view than when you're receiving. So we'll see where that goes. I like the recommendation. I think Sahalee has an advantage that we have a number of designs that have been done and projects that have been started. So it's much further along. The one caveat is if we put that in, which I think we should, this council will have to very quickly decide which of the different designs. Is it that 3-lane one, or there were some that were like 5 lanes, which have an astronomical increase in cost, and plus it goes into Sahalee Golf Course, and that raises a different issue. So recognizing that we will have to come to that decision as well very shortly. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
I seem to recall that there was money that was put into a transportation study that was going into the Sahalee and then 202.
I can answer. So we went in on the last session and we got 200,000 that Department of Transportation is currently doing a study on 202 for Sammamish from 520 down. But we have not received that report yet back, and then we're going to be utilizing that as a basis of some of our work. We've also asked, at least the Legislative Committee asked Senator Mancra-Dingra if she would provide additional funds or seek additional funds for us to take that initial study into a design for whatever recommendations they have.
Okay, great, thanks.
So one quick thought. I do like the idea of Councilmember Ritchie's of specificity, but I think Councilmember Valderrama highlighted some of the issues with it, is that if we go to the legislature with Sahalee as a identified project, it's not really shovel ready. It's shovel ready when there's a public process that takes place, and we would be circumventing that. And so I don't think I can support that. I think the only shovel ready project we have is Falls City Road.
But we already have funds from that, don't we?
And we don't have design for anything else. So I'm not sure. I like the idea, but I don't think we technically have anything that's shovel ready.
We have some designs for Sahalee, just multiple.
We do, but there was a public process that took place. And I think, we don't know, what it will be until we get through the TMP process, whether it's a 3 or 5 lane. And I think there has to be a public process, even if it's 5 lane, for the exact problems that you identified. And so I would hate to circumvent that by having a 5-lane design as our legislative priority, and the public's going to go, wait, what? So that's my concern with doing that. It's just, it's not technically shovel ready without that public process. But I really do like the idea of the specificity in it. So, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I would agree. I like the idea. I think that we do need to ask for money. I do share a similar concern over Sahalee that it's not actually shovel ready. But to the issue of the study, if we can get the results of that, I think that's a great project. The whole 202 part is a great project to consider. Even if it's not shovel ready, it might be that we need the money for the designs, because we can make Sahalee as many lanes as we want to. Much of that backup on Sahalee starts with the backup on 202. And so if we can find out what the results of that are, that does seem like a good state-funded type of project, because it's multi-jurisdictional, but it has a direct assistance to Sammamish. The other thing that might be worth is finding out if we need money, and I mean without Steve here, but for studies around the whole Marymore area, right? And trying to prepare for how we get people to light rail. And if the M is mobility, can we put in there that we want more money for transit too? I mean, that's part of mobility. Can you put more than one ask in the M? How many times can we dip
Why
in
doesn't
there?
the M just become money?
Yes,
I was going to say
like that.
Money.
The M is money. I like it. But no, I do think you're right. We have to be very specific. We can't just say we need money because we have stuff to do. I think we need to get very specific. But I think we do need to make sure that they're things that we're ready. I think as opposed to saying it's shovel ready, I think they need to be things we're ready to spend the money on. So it may be doing the design work once we get the results of the study. It may be asking for more transit routes that we know we need. I can tell you from personal experience, yesterday going downtown for jury duty, getting back to the east side at Microsoft, and then trying to get home all on the bus. We don't make it easy for people to use the bus. It was great once I got on the bus. It was awesome. I'm so glad I didn't drive and have to park. But the ability to the frequency of service and that kind of stuff is just not where it needs to be. And that's where I'd love to see us do better. The buses were pretty full, so people will do it, even when we make it hard. So imagine how many people would take the bus if we made it easy.
And Madam Mayor, what we can do is we can bring back to you a list of those projects that could be teed up because they're shovel ready to go. We can also bring back to you a list of those that we could go for money for design for as well. So you can look at both those, kind of pick and choose what you want to go and where we want to make that priority. So,
Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. City Manager, that's exactly what I was going to ask, is if we do not have what we need for Sahalee, that's just my perspective. I mean, what we need are actionable information. What can we
put that together for you, and you can take a look at it.
And if there's something, like you said, beyond that, though, what do we need to do? What information are we waiting on? We're expecting it by this date, and then let's have a plan so that we're not caught flat-footed in future legislative sessions without the data that we need. Not that we're flat-footed now, but I want to make sure that we have an understanding of what's transpired before the new members of this council. Why were the 3 lanes, why did that not get anywhere? What was the public process behind that? And what would the TMP involved, and how can we move this forward? Does the TMP take priority, or does the opportunity to work with a legislative session and a new lobbyist, tools we haven't had in front of us before? You don't get too many asks at these things, and we want to make the right ask at the right time. And I think it's critically important that we do that, and that takes information and some background work from staff. So I'm grateful for the city manager in preparing that. But I would also hope that my fellow council members, we can work together so that we're not setting some goal out there is that it will be this when we get that. Let's figure out what that is. Let's get that date set. Our traffic and our trees are our priorities. Let's work on those, and let's work with the lobbyists that we've hired and that we're paying significantly for to make sure that they have what they need from us. And let's let our citizens speak, not the schedule. Let's let our state legislators work for us, not the other way around.
Hey, Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, let me add a little bit of urgency onto the issue. The state just passed recently the 12-cent gas tax. Normally, those happen once a decade. However, because of circumstances, there is a buzz in the legislature that they may this session, because of all the pressures that are coming on transportation, pass a special bill for transportation. So we won't be able to come for another one for a decade. So basically, this is our chance to go in if we're going to have an impact. Sahali is the road we all agree on. At a bare minimum, let's go in with the 3-lane. We've gone through public process with it. We can see what the TMP adds to it. I doubt it'll add 5 just because that road's gone down the cliff once before. It would go down again, even with, or prohibit. Oh, twice, sorry, my bad. Don't look now. So I would say put Sahali on the road. We can gather other information, but let's prepare that this be our once-in-a-decade call. We can augment it with the information that's coming from the design and that, but let's not lose this opportunity now. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart?
Yeah, sorry, back to transit. I seem to recall last year, before I was on the council, that there was a lot of discussion around transit and that if we had certain densities of students, that we were owed additional transit lines. And I don't know if that ever got resolved. That may be a King County Metro, and I'm not trying to derail the conversation, but just as I think about our transit needs and that, you know, again, we're not going to build our way out of this issue completely, even if we build more roads. Is that something we can try to follow up on? I don't know if you, if Councilmember Hornish or Mayor Malchow or Councilmember Volderama, if you recall that. But Councilmember Huckabee was discussing the fact that there was some thing that if we had a certain density of students that we were supposed to have certain bus lines from King County Metro, I think it was.
I don't recall it being brought to this council. It may have been discussed in the policy TP or one of those
Okay.
groups.
All right, I can follow up and see if I can get more detail.
She's still
See what I can
around.
find out
Yeah.
for you.
All right, sorry about that. I'm just very keen on getting more transit.
Okay, I don't have any more lights on, so
We'll bring you those lists and we'll find the design where they're at for
that
Holly,
3
so you
lanes?
can take a
Thank
look
you.
at it.
Good job, guys. Thank you.
Well, more than Sahali.
I would agree, more than
Yeah.
Sahali. The transit idea, I think, has a lot of merit as well.
We'll package
so-
all that
Yeah,
to bring
okay.
it in, so it won't just be one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Just timing wise here, we need to, just looking at the schedule, look at our calendar here, we've got a handful of meetings before the end of the year. We need to have this in hand, I'm going to say soon, within a week or so, maybe 2 weeks after the election, the first week in November. Those meetings, we talk to our representatives, our lobbyists. Decisions are made, priorities are set in those first few meetings when those legislators are not even taking their oath yet. We need to have something in front of them, so.
Let me consult with staff and we'll try to have that for your first meeting in November.
Thank you.
Okay, next thing on our agenda is just the minutes from the legislative committee. I'm not sure that we need to really do anything there. Unless, Mr. City Manager, you need us to do something with, okay,
Just accept those.
okay. Do we need to accept them here? Normally, we approve them in
No,
committee.
As long as you don't have any changes to them, I think they're probably
Okay.
fine.
I'm okay.
Okay.
I think it's more of a report than it is an
Yeah.
approving of the minutes.
Well, I was going to say, I'd like this because it gives us, without having the verbal report, I can read it before the meeting and I know what, if I have
Right.
questions and
Right.
we don't have to spend more time. I'd like this.
Yeah. Okay, so then the next item is council report. The only thing I put on there is discussion about SCA committee applications. So that process is open now. The application deadline is October 31st. And then I just put on there the current committees that were placed on, and then a discussion of whether or not each one of us are planning to reapply for these committees, and then a discussion about what committees you're planning to apply for, because SCA has made it clear that we can't double up. They will not appoint either one of those because they will not pick one council member over another from the same jurisdiction. So I will open it up. Councilmember Ritchie.
Just a point of order, or I guess order of our agenda here. We did have new business to attend, so can we go
What-
back and
what
go-
new business
We
that-
have new business that we had discussed earlier today that's not on the agenda.
Okay, but the agenda wasn't amended, so there wasn't any new business added to the agenda.
Motion it.
So you'd have to make a motion. We're in the middle of this. Can you make your motion after we're done with this?
Sure.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so as far as committee placement, Are those of you who are on committees currently planning to reapply for your same committee positions? Okay,
Yes.
so. I as well. Krista, do you have one and I miss it? Or no? Okay.
I thought you subbed for. I'm a backup on several. Oh, okay.
Okay.
But maybe not the SCA ones, maybe.
Maybe it's not. Okay. I thought I went through the whole SCA thing looking for, but it's possible I overlooked.
Such a short name.
Okay, and then there's a whole bunch of committees that you can apply for, so I figured if you're planning on applying for additional committees, this would be a good opportunity to let your fellow council members know which ones you would desire to apply for so that we're not doubling up on anything. So, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so last year when we did this, I put together a spreadsheet so that people could see kind of who was on what committee currently, and then people could add their name to the spreadsheet so that if they wanted to, that way people could go through it at their leisure, add their name, and then people could see if there was any conflict. I don't know if that's something we could put together and throw out on a share so people could see it. Just make that available so people can go through again and do that. It's probably something, we're all going to do it at 1 a.m. when we get home.
Yeah, sure. Mr. City Manager, could you do that? I mean, I think you can generate it, start off of this list, and if you need my help to find SCA's various committees.
We can put that together for you.
And if you look at last year's, I actually pulled the list of all the committees. And so there were a lot of blanks because we obviously weren't on most of them, but that way it listed it out so people could see the whole list. So if you can
That's a
find
good
that.
idea.
There may be some different ones, or
Yeah,
at least
it
name
might be easier to
changes.
reconcile
All
that.
home is, I think, different.
And then another question, Mayor, what about, so on that list, I actually included non-SCA committees as well, just so people could see the full picture. Is that something that we need to be reevaluating now that we're at the end of the year?
Probably towards the end of the year. SCA,
Okay.
I think we should stick to SCA specifically because that deadline is
that's-
October
okay.
31st, and we won't formally do
Okay.
ours until next year.
Okay, so we'll do it at the retreat again
Mm-hmm.
in January. Okay.
Okay, Councilmember Ross.
No, I echo what Pam Stewart, Councilmember Stewart said. A full list would help because there is some open committees and I might want to volunteer apply for one of those.
Very good. Okay. Councilmember Ritchie, were you going to make a motion then?
Yeah, thank you. I would like to make a motion that we amend the emergency ordinance from last meeting where we included several pre-applications in the ordinance, and I would like to move that we exempt the 65 lots from the ordinance for those that have filed pre-apps.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Councilmember Ritchie, do you want to speak to your motion?
Nope. I'm fine.
It's on. Deputy Mayor Moran.
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay, Councilmember Hornish.
I'm puzzled as to how we motion an ordinance.
Depending on how the discussion goes, my strong recommendation would be that the staff be directed to bring back an ordinance in 2 weeks that reflects the amendment to the ordinance you adopted on the 18th. It would be likely unenforceable to attempt to amend an ordinance simply by voice motion.
Would it require a hearing?
Boy, that's a great question.
And to schedule it with
We already
30-day
have a hearing.
notice? And
We already have a hearing slated on the emergency.
just an
not for this new ordinance. This is a
but
new
for the
ordinance.
emergency,
Yeah.
but it's a good question.
The question, in my view, and let me get back to you all by memo later this week I'll do some research and if I determine otherwise. But in my view, this would not require a hearing in 2 weeks. It would, the public hearing that the council will have to take within 60 days. Everybody knows that, right? So you adopted this moratorium extension last time around, so you have to have a public hearing. No, that was an extension.
You're not talking about you're talking about the
emergency ordinance.
Interim development regulations.
The interim
Because
development
interim
regulations.
development regulations follow the same procedure as a moratorium. So these were interim development regulations.
By emergency or
Right.
by emergency
The
action?
initial adoption.
Right.
So we still have to have a public hearing on those within 60 days.
November 6th.
We have November
Right.
6th.
So if there is an amendment to, so in my view, yes, you can amend this ordinance if you choose in 2 weeks with another ordinance and without a hearing, but then that amendment would be part of the subject of the public hearing that's scheduled in November now, too.
And would it have to be passed by majority plus one?
It would not, but the amendment would not be effective until 5 days after publication.
But not until after the hearing anyhow?
Right. No, it'll
No, it would
be, it would be effective 5 days after publication. in my
Emergency
view.
moratorium.
But-
or
It's only went in after a public hearing, 5 days if it's not an emergency.
No, so let's back up. The interim development regs were adopted at your last meeting.
By emergency.
Right, by emergency, and that was the initial adoption of them, so there's not yet been a public hearing.
Right.
So there is now a public hearing scheduled. If there is an amendment adopted by motion tonight, and then that amendment is confirmed, if you will, by ordinance in 2 weeks, then you can, if there are 5 votes, in my view, you can adopt that as an emergency as well, and it's effective immediately.
Then we would have to have a hearing.
Yeah, we're going to fold, the public hearing that's already scheduled on the ordinance that you adopted at your last meeting will also include any amending ordinance that is adopted before
But
that.
I'm really confused because typically when we have an ordinance, before we pass it, and it becomes effective 5 days later if it's not an emergency, we have a hearing.
Right.
So I don't know how we pass a hearing or pass an ordinance in 2 weeks without a hearing, unless it's an emergency that then becomes part of the emergency hearing on November 6th. But it seems to be, it has to be an emergency in 2 weeks to go to that hearing. Otherwise, we have to schedule a hearing for this amendment ordinance before we pass the ordinance and it goes into effect.
That's a reasonable position. This is an interesting question that you've raised. That's a reasonable position to take. Let us do a little more research and get back to you all. But I'm thinking, as I sort of awkwardly explained, that the hearing would not be required in advance. But it's a reasonable position, and I'm not sure there's a case law out there.
Typically, we have a hearing before we adopt an ordinance.
Absolutely, absolutely. The difference here being that the state statute on moratoria and interim development regs allows you to have that initial adoption without a hearing, right? As long as you have it within 60 days thereafter.
Under an emergency,
Right,
yeah,
right,
so
right. So let me take a look at that.
So that's why I'm trying to figure out what the vote would be required if it's under an emergency or whatever as well. So, okay.
Okay, Councilmember, okay, that light went out. Councilmember Valderrama. Oh, no, excuse me. Sorry, Deputy Mayor Moran.
Okay, so I'd like to read what I've got written here, just so everybody can hear how it would read. And this is what I've gotten written, and it was written, came from Mike this afternoon.
Well, yeah, just to clarify, earlier this afternoon, the mayor forwarded me an email that she had gotten from one of your fellow council members, I forget whom, Christie, and it included a draft motion that had been prepared by the master builders. I'm not commenting on the wisdom of the motion, but when I saw it, it seemed to me to be somewhat awkwardly worded. So what I tried to do was simply reframe that motion, capturing the content of what the master builders were intending, and provide that in a little more clear form. So that's all it is.
Okay, so to be clear, this is to capture those that were in the pipeline prior to the meeting of September 18th. Any development applications, feasibility and pre-application as defined in Sammamish Municipal Code 20.05.030 that have been accepted prior to September 18th, 2018, and processed by the city under the pre-application process set forth in the Sammamish Municipal Code Section 20.05, Procedures for Land Use Permit Applications. This is really dry. For purposes of this ordinance, accepted shall mean the filing of feasibility guidance form by the applicant or its agent and the acceptance of payment by the city of Sammamish. Any such acceptance development application shall be processed pursuant to the ordinances and other regulations in effect on September 18th, 2018.
Okay, Councilmember Valderrama.
of order, is that a new motion, or where are we at on this motion
I'm not sure.
processing?
Councilmember Ritchie made the motion, but I think our city attorney has advised
No,
us that
that's,
we can't.
I think she's speaking to create specificity into the motion as
So
to who would
is
be.
that a new motion, or is that, what is that?
I accept that as an amendment to the motion to add clarity.
Or you can withdraw your motion and she can
Yeah,
make
we
that
can.
I
motion.
could do that too. Then I withdraw my motion.
Then you have to second hers.
She hasn't, is that your motion? Then I second your motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Do you want to speak to your motion?
This, for me, was an issue when we said that we were opening the doors and everybody was welcome to, we were back open for business. And we caught people, I mean, apparently 65 lots or whatever it is, that we caught people between there and when the emergency stuff hit on September 18th. And for me, it's those people that came in good faith, they knew they were taking the chance they might get caught and the moratorium may not lift, they may get caught in the stuff going on with the transportation issues, and they still were willing to take that chance, and we still changed the rules on them. And so to me, I just had heartburn over it. So that was my issue. And so that was why I wanted this.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, I support this motion. We have people here who, well, first, we knew that staff was working on some of these issues going on. We did not know it was coming forward. The people who were working, the citizens going through their application, were basing their application that the moratorium would be lifted. And at first we said July, then October, and I think most people believed that it was going to be lifted on October 3rd, and we're working towards that goal. One thing I've heard from all the council members over the last year is that they recognize the need for predictability. They recognize the need for transparency and predictability, and the predictability that they had was once the moratorium was lifted, that they would be able to process. That's what we had messaged to them, and when we had messaged it to them. As it turns out, this was a surprise, frankly, not just to them, but to the council as well. I had no idea. The only one I think that knew about this was the mayor, who had her statement prepared that you read and shared with the comment. But I didn't know this was coming. We knew it was in the background work, so there was a transparency issue that's also in play in this that needs to be addressed. But these people were going in good faith, working towards what the council had been messaging towards them. And as we did in and we have precedents of having done it with the concurrency, we did accept the pre-apps that were going, recognizing that they had invested and should be grandfathered in, as is in this motion. So I will be supporting this motion.
Well, there aren't any lights on, so I'm going to go ahead and speak. I was not the only one that knew about this. We had 2s and 3s meetings over the summer, and it was discussed in the agenda meeting, so it's
No,
not.
let me, my statement was.
You're interrupting. You do not have the floor. So I was not the only one that knew about it. We all had these meetings over the summer, and to my knowledge, I don't think staff received any negative feedback from council. It wasn't until we passed it and we had members from the development community that pushed back that this became an issue. I will not be supporting any motion that will allow for somewhere between 51 and 65 additional single-family homes to be built that counter everything that our constituents have told our staff and myself for years. I have been on too many site visits where regrading these homes has created 6-foot walls in front of people. They have spent thousands of dollars re-landscaping to try and hide the fishbowl effect that development is doing. I have pictures. I think you all saw at least one in my response to one of the public commenters today. But this mass grading creates drainage issues for these neighbors as well. Connor Jarvis is another one where most recently there was another issue back there with grading. They happen everywhere, and I think what we've done here is we've listened to our constituents. We've listened to the residents and their complaints. In 2014, there was a particular development that set this city on fire. And this fixes that problem. The rounding issue that we heard today, we're the only city that rounds up. Why should we be the only city rounding up and squeezing more in? What we hear from people is that they don't like the setbacks, and the houses are so close together. And recently there was a fire in Sammamish because we have things so close. And I think if you asked our fire chief, they would tell you when you have really small setbacks, you can actually lead to fires spreading from one home to another. There is value in safety. The other thing we heard about was private easements. City Hall gets tons of complaints from our residents about those private easements. That why didn't you plow my street? Well, it's not a public road. They can't plow it. And then when it comes time to repave it, it's on the homeowners association, and that's usually a burden. While people probably could read their CCNRs, they don't realize that that is private and that they are responsible for it. Garbage cans get drug all the way to the end of the street, and City Hall's the one on the other end of the phone answering those complaints about people blocking my driveway with garbage cans because they have to haul them all the way down those private easements. So anyway, I think I commend staff for listening to our residents and compiling a group of reasonable things. I understand people got caught. And you know, to some degree, I do sympathize with them, but we have this right to put an emergency ordinance in place. Okay. Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, and piggybacking on that viewpoint, it's very clear that the Washington courts have decided at what point can you change it. And they've decided, not us as 7 local members, but the courts of the Washington state have decided that only when you have a complete application do you vest. And now we're saying, oh, we know more than the state courts, so we're going to back it up to pre-apps. But the state law is only vested if you have. And so my point is, there are developers that understand the risk that you only get vested when it's a complete app. And that's all we're trying to do is enforce the Washington state law in that regard. So this is nothing new. This is not something different that the developers are getting treated differently in Sammamish. This is something that happens everywhere in the state of Washington as to what happens when you change something that some people have to go back to the drawing board.
So we've got several lights on that are round 2. Councilmember Stewart, you haven't spoken yet, have you? I'm going to have Councilmember Stewart speak first.
So it sounds like we need, if I understand correctly, what we're saying is we're kind of getting a discussion going here, but that our very knowledgeable city attorney has said that we would need to come back in 2 weeks with this anyway. Is that correct? That we wouldn't be passing this tonight, or it would be coming back in 2 weeks?
If the council, my recommendation is that the council take an up or down vote on the motion that's on the floor. If the motion passes, we should come back to you in 2 weeks with an ordinance that reflects the motion.
Okay.
And the ordinance would amend the ordinance that you adopted 2 weeks ago, and I will also get you a response to Tom Hornish's questions.
So what I would like to do is I would like to move forward with that and ask that we get a little more information. So here's my my personal dilemma, which is that Mayor Malchow is correct. We all did have meetings on this in the spring. And so I do think, though, that Councilmember Valderrama is correct in that we probably should have brought these forward then and not as an emergency, because we also, as a body, as a matter of public record, made a point to take a vote and allow and tell staff that they should, kind of open the doors for business for pre-application meetings again. And we did that knowing that we were potentially going to consider these regulations. And so where I'm caught between a rock and a hard place, I think, is that I support these regulations. I think they are great. I think having houses further apart, I think all of the things that we're looking to do are the right thing to do. What I struggle with is the fact that we weren't transparent. We invited people to come and invest, knowing that we were going to pass these, and we should have probably done that in a different order. Given that, I think the previous council set a precedent that when the moratorium was passed, you made exceptions for those folks who were already in the pipeline, even though, again, to Councilmember Hornish's point, the state law says you only vest if you have a completed application. The city of Sammamish set the precedent here that we would allow people who had completed their pre-app meetings to go forward, even in light of the moratorium. So I feel like, I guess we have precedent both ways, but here in the city of Sammamish, we have said, look, if we've kind of invited you in and you've invested and we've invested our time, then we may make some considerations. That being said, the additional information I would like to ask, and maybe Jeff is at the podium to answer because he anticipates our every need, is to understand of the 65 lots that we're talking about, do any of them have some of these issues of the fishbowl effect or some of that, some of the grading issues or whatever? And maybe we can have some additional information to know what kinds of issues we may or may not be putting forward. But I do feel like we as a council created a, please come and submit your application, spend your money, take up our staff time, and then we change the rules at the very last minute. And that does trouble me a bit. So I'm a little bit concerned there. And I think it would be great if we could move forward if we're going to have to bring this back and vote on it again anyway.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Again, Council, my arrival at the podium was not based on anticipating Councilmember Stewart's question about fish bowls. However, she did mention the number 65 in her comments, and that is actually why I came to the podium to just make a brief factual correction for the council before you go to round 2 of your comments. Mr. Kenyon's language that was read by the deputy mayor, I believe, if that language is what you're going to vote on here at some point this evening, I would like to simply correct that the anticipation of impact from that language, approving that language and then adopting a subsequent amendment to an ordinance would be a total of 13 separate projects with 108 lots of single-family development. So the 65 number, which has been cited a few times here this evening, was based on the moving forward of pre-application projects that had pre-application meetings only to date prior to from the time of being open for business up until September 18th. With the additional flavors of words that are put into what was read here this evening that we've got this motion on, that does add a number of more lots that have had feasibility pre-development services conferences, as well as, well, that would be it actually. So you get from 65 to 108 based on that. So the inclusion of both those things in that language raises the number from 65 to 108. Councilmember Stewart, to your question that you did ask me while I was standing here, unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you on that. Pre-application meetings generate, and certainly even to a greater extent, the feasibility pre-development services conferences. They generate varying levels of information. These sorts of things are such that the better information we receive, the better feedback a customer would receive. But we don't necessarily get to that level of detail in these types of meetings. Sometimes with pre-apps we do, sometimes we don't. So,
Can we ask him a question?
Yeah, I have questions for him too.
Do you remember what we did in the moratorium? Did we include the feasibility? I'm trying to make the distinction in my mind. It's not the same time period, is it, that's being proposed now?
So I did telegraph that question coming, so I did look at it before watching
See,
the
he
podium.
does anticipate our needs.
It's a little hit and miss, but to answer that question, so that was a subsequent amendment that was made to the development moratorium ordinance that was initially adopted, ironically, tomorrow, October 3rd, 2017. So That amendment was brought forward, I'd have to go look again for the exact date, but it was brought forward after the initial ordinance was adopted and was added in. And you'll also recall there was a town center amendment related to that development moratorium that was inserted after the fact, then removed again. So,
But my question is, when we inserted that on the moratorium, is it the same time period in the process of pre-meetings, pre-applications, complete applications, or is it different in this one?
it was specifically targeted towards pre-application, completed pre-application meetings, and there was some additional language in there.
And this is backed up even farther.
This language is, that's correct.
That's what I wanted to distinguish. Okay. Okay.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Moran. Oh, no, sorry. I've got Councilmember Valderrama. Oh,
Yeah.
you've already spoken once, though, so I got to go back to people that haven't
But I've
spoken.
heard others speak twice.
But Councilmember Ross hasn't spoken yet.
Oh,
so.
okay.
Just a couple things. On the precedent is a concern. The pre-meetings with the expectation of an outcome of just the moratorium being the roadblock at the risk. But then on the flip side, I'm concerned about now we're talking about 108 lots. And I also understand that staff was looking at some drawings from the development community, and there was quite a difference in the assessment of the development community versus staff. So for those reasons, I would pause and make sure, I would like to get more facts, settle on the facts, and understand the impact.
All right, now we're going back for round two. Councilmember Valderrama.
Thank you. Yeah, first of all, for clarification, my comment was that we did know it was being worked on. I said that on the council, we did not know it was coming that night, which added to the optics of what was taking place for the citizens. I will remind the council that, first of all, we did discuss the timing of the pre-apps and should it be further back or not. That was a discussion on the last council, so we did have a precedent of even going further back in that discussion. So there was precedent on that. We did release the pre-apps. We also released about 3.5 years worth of houses from the moratorium that went into the pipeline that were under construction. In fact, what we really had tightened down was the, if I'm not mistaken, 16 short plats, 2 long plats that were just released here early. So there was a precedent for that. We are looking at predictability of these people that were going forward. The optics of lifting the moratorium and putting a moratorium of sorts on them again by putting these in after they've gone through this to reevaluate isn't fair for them or the businesses. And frankly, that can go on to the next discussion I'm sure that we'll be having on the town center as we've been affecting a lot of our businesses. So I would say for predictability and transparency, I supported it, and we have the precedent behind us. Thank you.
Mayor Moran.
Well, I also want to say that I do think a lot of the work that's been done by staff, I like a lot of the work that's been done by staff, and I'm happy to see that they're going to be reaching out and having all the stakeholders at the tables and having the conversations that I think they should have been having and having them now. I think they're great. I think what they've come up with are great. And we keep saying Highcroft, but we keep forgetting that the Highcroft couldn't happen today anyway, because since then we've changed the ordinances already. So there have already been changes in place. So, I'm just trying to, rather than use scare tactics of things, there's already changes in place, so Highcroft couldn't happen even if we let it go today. So the pre-app meetings, I don't know what happened in the last councils. I don't know precedents. I don't know any of that. I'm looking at the people that invested a bunch of money, the 65 lots that have had their pre-app meetings. That's I guess the group that I'm interested in. We can go later and look at anybody else, but it's really I guess that's 65 lots. So if we need to clarify that. And I'm going to propose an amendment. Okay, she's going to propose an amendment. So that is the crew that I'm at this time, I'd like to see us do something with. We can talk about something later if we need or not. But I do think the stuff that I thank our staff for doing the work that they've done, and I think it's great work. But I want to be clear that, you know, I'm not out to in any way to say that that's bad or in any way, and you know, we shouldn't do that. It's just that we've caught people in a bad way, and that's not right either.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
I would like to propose an amendment that we amend the, was it a proposed ordinance or proposed, is that what? That we amend the motion for the ordinance to include only completed pre-application meetings, and that we eliminate the feasibility studies and other services.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Did you want to speak to your amendment?
No, I think we've beaten that horse.
Deputy Mayor Moran?
Yes.
You have your light on.
Sorry.
Okay.
It's the seat.
It is. Okay, so I don't have the language that you have in front of you, Deputy Mayor, for the original motion, but the amendment that we're looking at is only completed pre-application meetings. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Okay, by a vote of 6-1, the motion fails, or passes, excuse me.
Nice try.
It's just to amend the motion.
Right.
That's
Now,
correct.
I need your language here if I can.
Oh, forget all my
I don't
notes.
have. Okay, so the original motion now as amended is, well, I don't know if I really need to read all this, actually. Is just, so technically the amendment really is the motion for all intents and purposes here, I believe. Is that a fair assessment? Okay, so,
Wait a minute, is there some section in there that needs to be taken out, though?
well, it says any development applications, feasibility and pre-application, so that would have to be stricken.
The feasibility part
Yep.
is what needs to be
Well, but
stricken.
the what we just passed said completed pre-applications, so completed pre-applications, as defined in Sammamish Municipal Code.
Well, completed pre-application meetings. It wasn't a completed pre-application. It was to complete.
Right, but that, yes,
so that
but this didn't say completed, it just said pre-application.
I have a question. That's the 65 original?
Yeah, I believe that is.
Jeff, do you want to confirm that? Is that okay.
Yes.
Prior to September 18th, as processed by the city under the pre-application process set forth in the SMCs. Okay, so is everyone comfortable with Karen's language in hers and then what the amended motion is?
Mayor, there's another provision. You'll see the definition of accepted, the fourth line down. Accepted shall mean the filing of a feasibility guidance form and acceptance of city payment. So I seems to me that perhaps that should come out as well.
The feasibility guidance form?
Right, because we're talking about a pre-application meeting that has occurred. Jeff, is there an actual pre-application form that we should refer to, or just the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. City Attorney, for helping us with this.
And again, Council, I think this is clear to everybody, but obviously staff has no ownership in this. We're just trying to make more clear the proposal by the master builders, so that's why we're stumbling around a little bit here tonight.
So to answer the question of the city attorney, both would be the answer. So there's an actual list of items to submit, and then there's an actual meeting that occurs. I'm just looking up here. I don't know if this would be helpful. This is the language that was actually adopted now in 3 prior moratorium ordinances related to pre-apps. If I may humor you for a moment, I'll just read that.
Please.
It might make things more consistent. So what was adopted for 3 different moratorium ordinances is the following related to pre-application meetings. Permits and approvals for any type of properties outside of the town center zoning district submitted on or before October 3rd, 2017, this is the key part, including those for which a pre-application meeting was completed with the city to the satisfaction of the community development director and/or designee.
I like that.
Yeah.
Do we have to,
Can we use that language in the?
do we have to make an
Do we need
amendment?
another amendment, though?
We would.
Okay. Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
I would like to amend my amendment to say what Jeff just said.
Wow, this is-
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded.
Can you telegraph it again to her?
Would you like me to read it?
Please.
So,
To the satisfaction of the community
It would be
development director.
so that language reads, the end of that language reads, including those for which a pre-application meeting was completed with the city to the satisfaction of the community development director and/or designee.
Okay. So is everyone clear on what we are voting on? The motion as amended twice? No, just the amendment, actually. We're
Just the
vote-
amendment
Just the
right now.
amendment. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 6-1, the amendment passes. So now we're voting on the main motion as
is the amendment.
which is amended to specify completed pre-application meetings, and then the language that Jeff just referenced regarding to the satisfaction of the community development director or designee. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, by a vote of 5-2, the motion passes. So I'm assuming in 2 weeks, then you'll bring back something.
Who are the two?
We,
Hornish and Melchior?
Yeah.
so we'll work with Jeff and his staff to bring back to you an ordinance that amends the interim development regs that you adopted 2 weeks ago, and the amendment, of course, will reflect the motion just passed. So.
I have a question for the attorney. Since it's 5-2, that is enough for an emergency ordinance as well. Should ever have played into it? There was some comment early on about that.
Well, yeah, the different questions. So
that's why I said
if
different
if the ordinance is adopted 5-2 in 2 weeks, then it could be adopted as an emergency. That's true. But different question than what Tom asked, which we will still answer.
Okay, so the city manager was kind enough to provide us his city manager's report in writing. Hopefully, everyone had an opportunity to read it then, because you need some feedback from council, correct?
Just to,
I had one more thing. I hate to do this to you.
Can we do it right after this, or no? I mean, is it, we're not adjourning yet, we still have an executive session.
Okay.
few things. On item number 1, if that process is agreeable to you, we'll bring you back the process so you can act on that.
I'm sorry.
That's the process relative to the
Mayor's
newsletter? Okay.
We will also understand that you have a communication committee, and we'll insert that in there as opposed to the committee that I mentioned. And of course, if you rotate this, we'll call that the councilor's newsletter versus the mayor's newsletter. On proclamations too, just a clarification, my understanding, because I was a little confused on it, is that when you have those, you'll have a slide that we can show what those proclamations are. So we'll illustrate those. And then the 2 items
I'm
that I
sorry,
need.
I have a,
Yes, Councilmember Stewart.
on that one, is there a way that we can still pass the proclamations as part of the consent agenda, but actually read them? I mean, they're not that long, and I just really feel like, I think Councilmember Ritchie mentioned this once before, they only take us 2 minutes to read, but from a community perspective, for the people that these are meaningful to, they're really meaningful to, and to give them their 2 minutes to actually read it and be able to have that kind of attention, I would like to propose that we do something like that if we can do it in a way that still meets all the rules. I just feel like reading that proclamation, and we can take turns reading it. We could ask someone more neutral to read it. I don't want to create like an issue from a political standpoint or anything like that. I just want to be able to give the community their minute or two, when they come and they want to see their proclamation passed. I just think it's really anticlimactic when you don't get to have it read. So
That's not an uncommon thing for cities to do. What you may want whoever is forwarding a proclamation before they do that is seek a sponsor on the council, and that sponsor could be the person who reads the proclamation.
yeah, I would like to propose that we do that, just because I again, if it's really important to people, I would just like to give them their 2 minutes. I would like to move that we change our procedure to still be allowed to approve proclamations via consent, but have them read aloud as the first agenda item for any community members that may be in attendance.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Discussion, Councilmember Ross?
Yeah, I think there will be some from time to time. What comes to mind is the consent agenda had up to 4 proclamations in one consent agenda. And there's other activities in the city that are important are not being promoted as well. So I would recommend that a hybrid, a little bit different, but if we would just have one slide at the first meeting of the month that lists all the proclamations or accompany each meeting that has a consent agenda, have the proclamations and other achievements and or recognition the city wants to highlight for the community. So we'd have basically a status of the city with proclamations and other achievements that we reach out to the community. And to respect what Councilmember Stewart was articulating, there may be a proclamation that some council member has a passion for. So rather than pull all 4, perhaps pull 1. I'm not adverse to that. But I think we can seriously regulate and communicate effectively, and those who want to read the details can go into the consent agenda and read it in more detail. So I think we're kind of reaching a middle ground and achieving more efficiency in our meetings and in actually enhancing communication when you add the achievement and recognition element of the city.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
My concern, that's because I'm picking on time when running meetings, is when you get to having 4 and 5 or how many of these on a meeting, let's be clear, it's not 2 minutes. Because you're going to want to read it, and you're going to have the sponsor who read it, and then you're going to come up and you're going to have pictures, and it's not 2 minutes. So if you have 5 minutes, which really 5 minutes is not bad for that, it's worth 5 minutes. I give you that. And if you have 5 of those, and then you're going to have a break in between because it's a Sammamish 5, so let's be fair. And okay, so now we're 40 minutes into the meeting, because we do Sammamish 5s around here a lot. And I just want people to understand when we decide we're going to do that, that sets a different meeting. So I kind of like the idea of doing it, if we're going to do that, that it be part of a different agenda on a meeting, that it actually be part of the agenda, that is part of the meeting.
Are you making an amendment? Because we have a motion on the floor, is why.
Karen, can you hit your light so I can see who's next? Thanks. Councilmember Valderrama.
I was wondering if we could amend it to offer to do 1 per meeting to limit it, because there are a number of items that'll come, but to bring in a number to Karen Moran's point, the Deputy Mayor's point, that it can become cumbersome. And there are a lot of good things. In past councils, we used to recognize every one of our state champions. The problem was that we would have 2 football state champions, we'd have the volleyball state champions, the baseball regional champions. This is Tinseltown is what Seattle calls. We just had so many champions that our city got dragged down by those, and then there were all of that. Eventually it ended up into a big fight amongst the council as to which sports, because we weren't honoring soccer enough. But that said, if we could limit it to 1 per meeting, I think that would be a manageable way to go through, and that way we could pick which is the biggest issue if there are multiple ones. And I don't know how many times we have multiple, but that would be a way to at least ensure that we have the time. That would be my recommendation.
Is that a formal amendment or just a recommendation?
She asked, is that a formal amendment?
Yes, I'll make that as a formal motion to amend.
Second.
Okay, that one's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Hornish.
I'll defer till we vote on this one.
Okay. Councilmember Ritchie.
Same.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so I appreciate the idea to save time. My concern with your proposed amendment is that, so we had 4 tonight. We'll spend 30 minutes fighting over which one is the one we should read. And so just know us. So I'd be okay with us limiting the number of proclamations we pull forward. We could limit it to 2 or 3 per meeting. But I think if we have multiples and we have to choose one, that's going to be more contentious than just reading them all. I would, yeah.
Madam Mayor, I could suggest this. It may clarify that. What we could do is, with folks seeking proclamations, is limit the number placed on any one agenda to 2. That would be our rules. And also, if you have the sponsor, is if they want pictures, they would have to arrange with the sponsor ahead of time to take pictures prior to the meeting.
So the
Would you
reason
be
we're
willing to
discussing this is
amend
this
your
is something I brought up during the agenda meeting in general, because at one point we had 4 proclamations on, and all 4 were suggested that they were going to get pulled. And I figured that the reason they were going to get pulled was that we simply wanted to do more justice to the proclamations themselves rather than just have them on consent where they're not even read. My original suggestion was, can we send out more information using our social media channels, maybe the newsletter, whatever it is, through the city to highlight them in a better fashion, which doesn't burn council time in here. Melanie actually had a great idea, which was up behind us and on our screens today, and I think she just did that of her, on her own, but I thought it was a great idea. She actually put the proclamation up there, which is also a really nice way to highlight too. So there are some other mechanisms we might be able to consider. I'm kind of favorable to limiting it. I think you lose a little bit on your proclamations if you have 4 in the first place during a meeting. So I kind of like Councilmember Valderrama's idea of limiting it to 1 if we're going to start pulling them off and highlighting them in the council. So, but I do actually like our city manager's suggestion about coming in beforehand. So I might suggest that someone make that motion as an amendment.
We have a motion on
Okay.
amendment.
Well, I've got some lights on. So Councilmember Hornish?
I'll take mine off if I can come back and talk about the original motion first.
Okay.
Okay.
Councilmember Ritchie?
Are we discussing the original motion or
The amendment. The amendment, which is to limit it to 1.
To limit it to 1.
Councilmember Stewart, is your
Would you be willing to amend your amendment to be 2 to the city manager's point, and that we arrange for any fanfare to happen before the meeting?
I would be willing to amend to no more than 2, and preferably that we measure it that most times it'd be 1, but should the circumstance occur, that we could have 2 just for the facilitation and get this a more consensus on the group.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay. So the amendment is now 2 or less. And is that to have the fanfare in advance of the council meeting?
That's right.
Arrangements made. Okay. Councilmember Ritchie, is your discussion on that amendment? No. Okay. Your light's still on. Okay.
You don't want to take it off, I know.
Okay, so here we go. So we are now voting on the amendment to limit proclamations to 2 per meeting, and arrangements for pictures must be made in advance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey.
Was that 2 nays?
I'm a nay.
3.
3 nays.
Okay, so 4-3, that passes. Now we will go back to the main motion, which I'm not even sure what that was.
Well, it's really the amendment now.
Yes, I think, okay, so the main motion as amended is really limiting it to 2 per meeting and fanfare in advance. So Councilmember Ritchie.
Your mic's not on.
No, your light, he actually took his light off.
Took my light off by
His light
mistake.
was on. He took it off when he failed, so. Councilmember Ritchie.
I can be heard. Hey, so in recognition, I think one of the reasons we're here is for public recognition. It's part of our community and outreach, or communications and outreach. So I think any chance we have to take the spotlight off of the 7 or 10 of us and put it on our citizens is time well spent in this room. So proclamations, resolutions, I'm in favor of them being read out loud. I'm in favor of them being videoed, audioed, put in our newsletter, all that. Having said all that, because the motion that passed, I support the motion because it, at least in some way, sheds light on the community and the efforts that are being made, and again, takes the light off of us and puts it on the members of our community who are doing great things in our community, and we should exemplify that and talk about that and give them their moment as much as we possibly can.
Okay, Councilmember Hornish.
I generally agree with that. However, we are time limited, and we have established some rules to keep our time to a lesser, and we're going to push it to 10 o'clock tonight, it looks like anyhow. The thing I really like about the proclamations, we had it here tonight. If we have a proclamation and it means something to somebody, they get up there and talk about it. And that is what I think is what really highlights the proclamation. Not if I sit here and read, and today the city of Sammamish declares blah, blah, blah. That doesn't really do anything for me. That's what does it for me. So I think this, and if there really is something, we go back to the original rule, you can still pull it off. I mean, I know it's frustrating, but you can still pull it off if you want to. So I don't think there's any need to change it.
Well, especially if somebody's here to speak on it.
Right.
Can I offer an amendment?
I don't know, I've got Deputy Mayor Moran.
First of all, I wasn't being a grumpy old Gus. I was just saying that in light of keeping track of time, that maybe what we could do is we could, either condense them in meetings or move them so we can move them into 1 or 2 meetings a month where we could have more time spent on them if we're going to do that. We move them, or, maybe move them to some study sessions or stuff where we have a little more time that we could have spent rather than trying to keep them into such a tight agenda.
Councilmember Ritchie?
So I want to try to understand what the existing motion is more to Councilmember Hornish's point.
Did you want me to clarify? Or
I want to try to understand, I don't think this is us as council members reading it. I thought Councilmember Stewart's original motion had to do with whether it was the city manager or Melanie or somebody from the community speaking the motion out loud, whether maybe it's the person that's here to receive the proclamation. Anybody. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's necessary. It doesn't have to be us as council members. It's the speaking it out loud part of it that I think is, frankly, it's important to have people's voices heard literally, whomever is saying it. So I just want to clarify who. I don't think we clarified who the reader would be, and I think it should be on the screen too, whether it's 2 per meeting. I get it, that's the motion or the amendment that passed, but are we including some form of, do we offer the person that's here to receive it the opportunity to speak to it? If they don't want to stand up, do we speak for? I'm confused what we said we were going to do.
So the motion that passed was 2 per meeting and the photographs and stuff beforehand. So that's what passed.
We haven't clarified that.
So that doesn't stop someone like the gentleman that was here this evening from LifeWire spoke about the proclamation during public comment. So there was someone speaking to it. Just offering that up as there is an opportunity to them to speak to it. If we want to provide them maybe the language on the proclamation.
So I'd like to offer an amendment then that the proclamation is read out loud in council chamber.
By anyone.
By anyone.
Yep. I think that's what we're saying, though, the 2.
She said.
Oh, I see.
That wasn't what passed,
Okay.
but what
Got it.
passed was
Okay.
no more than 2
I'll
per meeting and the fanfare was beforehand.
I will second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Ross.
I'm trying to balance council efficiency with recognition. And we talked about festivities before, so if we have proclamations, I like that idea a lot, to honor those who are interested in that proclamation, to be recognized in front with pictures, et cetera. Perhaps what would really be maybe a win-win is to have 10 minutes before the meeting or whatever the duration is, have behind us the screen, if it's 2 proclamations, split screen with each proclamation fixated on the big projector. So people coming in all the way to the start of the council meeting can see the proclamation, and those who want to participate in festivities can do so before the start of the meeting. So it's a win-win. It actually gets in front of all those walking in, and it gets in recognition of those who are interested in it. So that become a custom, and those who are interested in the proclamations will show up early for those festivities. And then we start the meeting at 6:30 and we're clean. We then go to business.
I bet Melanie can do that without us even making a motion. And 10 minutes of discussion to follow. Okay. Councilmember Stewart.
So I like that idea. The one thing that I'll add, though, the reading it aloud during the meeting gets it on the video so that if you do it beforehand, it's not part of the video, so anyone who watches. I think we have a lot more people that watch the meetings than actually attend in person, so you miss that part. So I like that idea, and I'd be happy to see that so that people who are here get to have that feel-good meeting, but I still think that and if you want, I read really fast. I'm happy to read them to make sure that no proclamation takes more than 2 minutes, so that the amount of time we would spend reading the proclamations for the next 6 months would be less than the amount of time we spent discussing this.
Okay. Can we call the question then?
Yes.
Councilmember Ross, did you have something else or not? Okay.
What are we
Okay,
voting
so
on?
now we have an amendment to the amended motion, which is to read them aloud. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So by a vote of 4-3, okay, so we will read them out loud, but, okay, so now we have to vote on the motion as amended, I'm not even sure how many times. We're going to read them aloud, but there will be no more than 2 per meeting. But are we still having fanfare beforehand? Because that
If
was the
people
main
want,
motion.
yes.
Okay, all right, that's what we're voting on here. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
What was it on? Was this on fanfare?
This is the whole
Main
thing.
motion as amended, so we're reading them aloud. There could be 2 per meeting, fanfare in advance. You want to vote? Because we
Aye.
all did. Okay. All right, by a vote of 5-2, it passes.
Really, these meetings need to end by 9.
Well, if we don't have this much discussion about proclamations, they could. Okay, all right.
Spend a whole year as a
Mr. City Manager, you have additional items you need
Two
from us.
more items.
Yeah, this is going to be,
Some of you had concerns in regards to our arrangement with the YMCA. We have been in discussions with them. They're willing to meet with us, and so we can cover those issues. We just need to know who you would like to be part of that group. And secondly, I'll give this to you both, is on your city manager recruitment, we have received the RFPs. We've received 6 RFPs. We would like to have a subcommittee of the council, along with a couple of staff people, to score those, to bring back those RFPs as well as contract, and we'll try to get those back to by the first meeting in November. And again, do you want to utilize the same subcommittee that made the recommendation to seek a headhunter, or did you want different people to serve on that group? And so if I can get those folks, we can get those balls rolling to get to you as well. Hopefully shorter discussions when we get here with those. But
Councilmember Ritchie.
I'd like to nominate Councilmember Ross to serve on the YMCA review panel,
Yeah.
if he'd be willing to serve.
I'm assuming you're willing? Okay. Whoop, my little thing went out. I can't reach it.
Call the question.
Okay, nope, I got lights on. Councilmember Ross.
Your light's on.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Moran.
Along with Councilmember Ross, who I think absolutely needs to be there, I would like to see Councilmember Hornish.
I'd be proud to serve.
Do we need 2 or 3? Sorry. 2. 2 is good?
No, more than 3, so I think 2 is fine.
yeah, two's fine. So
Unless somebody else wants to sit on that. No takers. Okay.
Yep.
Formal motion on that, or we're good just head nodding on that one? Good.
And do you want to use same subcommittee on the,
That would be the 3 of us.
that'd be fine.
Yeah.
That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Excellent. So we do have an executive session. This is potential litigation, RCW 32.110.1I, and property acquisition, RCW 32.110.1G. 30 minutes?
Hold on, I think.
15,
did you-
okay.
Now? Didn't you?
She doesn't have her light on.
She had a.
Thank you. Am I on? Yes. Okay, so I would like to make a motion. In light of the email that was received late this afternoon from the STCA that outlines their Phase 1 commitments for 507 dwelling units and 100,000 square feet of commercial, that commitment to me satisfies the need for specificity for their Phase 1 build-out. So I would like to direct the city attorney, my motion is to direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance for our October 16th meeting that will end the moratorium, finish the moratorium on the town center, on the STCA.
On the STCA?
Well, on the town center.
Yes,
Just lift it.
on Phase 1.
On Phase 1 for STCA.
I'll second that.
Can I get some clarification? Because you said on Phase 1, but you also said in the moratorium. So is it in the moratorium or for Phase 1? I'm confused.
End the moratorium.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ross.
How's that any different than what we're already doing?
Well, because we extended them.
This is all news to me. So the motion is to just prepare an ordinance that repeals the moratorium?
That's what he said. Nope, he said the whole moratorium.
Well, all that's left in the well, let me follow proper etiquette and protocol. May I speak to my motion?
Yes, please. Has it been seconded?
Karen seconded.
Karen
yes.
seconded.
Okay.
So
We don't know what the heck the motion is
That's
yet.
what he's doing, he's clarifying now.
So the purpose of the motion is to recognize that the town center is the only remaining area that is under a moratorium currently. At our previous meeting, we lifted the moratorium on everything else. And it was my understanding that part of that process was to try to get some clarity as to what Phase 1 was going to look like. Based upon the email that was received today, this looks to me to be that clarity that we were seeking about what Phase 1 would look like. So my motion is to lift the remaining portion of the moratorium, which only includes the town center, period.
Councilmember Hornish.
I've not seen what we were even talking
I
about,
haven't
so I
either.
can't speak to it.
I haven't either. Councilmember Ross.
I don't support late-night haste motions that are critical. I think we stay the path that we're marching towards. It has clearly set forth goals and requirements, and it sounds like we're getting close within a week, so I just think we stay the course and finish what we set out to do.
Okay, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, I think the motion here is just to ask for the ordinance to be prepared and come back in 2 weeks. So we're not actually voting to do that. We're voting to direct and have that come back. We'd have to vote on it when it came back. Isn't that correct?
Yes, you'd have to vote on an ordinance at that point.
So I'm in favor of bringing that back, and then we can have that discussion. What was it, the October 16th?
16th.
16th meeting. So
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, similarly, again, we are not voting right now to do it. I think that it would allow us to gather more information to the 16th. We do understand and have this letter that's been given to us in addition to the earlier one that had been read. I understand there are other memorandums of understanding in process, at least 2 others that I'm aware of that are in process that we could at that time also discuss. I know the Dugan property and one other is in some state of discussions on the MOU. So I would be in favor of coming back on October 16th, given what this information, and then at that point, be able to take that vote and decision to move forward.
Councilmember Hornish.
Oh, and by the way,
It sounds to me like there was some OPMA violations if there are 4 members willing to vote for this, because I've not seen it, I've not considered it, And if you think that you're all in agreement, then there must be some discussions going on with the developer and you 4 members making agreements outside of this meeting. Therefore, I'd like to direct the city manager to get all emails and all correspondence and all texts from all members with STCA, if that's who we're talking about.
Including personal devices.
Including personal devices, because something here does not seem like we're transparent at all.
Councilmember Ritchie.
It's in your email.
Councilmember Ritchie.
There was an email sent I received it at 4:37 p.m. today that included all 7 of us and, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the city manager. That's the information I'm referencing. So as far as I know, I have not been party to any OPMA violation to create or any conversations that have exceeded 1s and 2s, never mind 3s or 4s. So what I'm referencing in my motion to ask the city attorney to prepare an ordinance is in response to the clarity that was brought by this email at 4:37 p.m. today.
So I'm going to second Councilmember.
I don't have that email, to be clear.
I haven't seen the email, but I haven't checked. I don't check my email that late close to a council meeting. So I haven't seen the email, but I do know that we came out here and several council members, we had a quorum out here and we tried to adjourn the meeting and no. So somebody had a conversation. There were people having a conversation back here about what was going to go on out here. So
I'm sorry, T. Hornish, correct? At Sammamish?
Well, I was looking at 4:37. I didn't have that. I'm finding it now because somebody responded, Romero.
But it's because the way the iPhone does it, it won't let you see the original. You only see the response in your queue.
Okay, Councilmember Ritchie.
I'm curious as to what evidence Councilmember Hornish or the sec from Mayor Malchow has for an investigation. I don't think anything like that's necessary. We're trying to create an opportunity here based upon the information that was received. I don't think the animosity or the anger or the resentment or the accusations are necessary. I think we're all trying to go the same direction here. I think I'm responding to an email that I had no part in making or asking for. We asked for an MOU. There's been a breakdown in communication for whatever reason so that an MOU isn't ready. I'm responding to the email that I received on my city email that all 7 of us are addressed to, whether we opened it or not before the council meeting, that addresses the concerns that were asked for by this council several times over the past several months by the town center that put them in the continuing state of moratorium. So my motion is focused on trying to answer their statements, their email, and to respond.
Councilmember Valderrama.
I would just second what was just said. I only have this one document, which is interesting what I was responding to. And there was a train. Obviously, you saw my message back and you saw the city manager's response that came forward. I find it fascinating that we talk about late nights, given what we've constantly been doing at late nights, including last week at 11:30.
Point of order. We don't need to revisit past actions, please.
No, it is. It was raised.
Point of order.
Your point is well taken.
Okay, I'm going to appeal it, and I'll state in my appeal.
You can, it has to be seconded.
Oh, okay. I appeal.
Second.
Okay. So I can speak.
No, just having it
to my
second.
appeal.
We have to vote on the appeal to whether or not you can.
You don't have to. Wait, I've got a point of order on the procedure. The procedure says you can bring up past items if it's a discussion. The item was raised by Councilmember Ross of past reason.
Okay,
So
you're talking about 11:30 meetings, and that is not germane to the motion on the floor, which is to end the moratorium.
again, let me explain. Councilmember Ross raised it. If a member raises it under the point of order, if you look at the Roberts rules, you will see if the discussion is of the group, then it can be raised. In fact, if you just wait with me, I will read you the rule of Roberts rules that you can have. Criticizing past action. If the group as a whole is discussing a past action, it is fine to criticize it or discuss it. So,
we're not discussing the past action. We're discussing the
Councilmember Ross
moratorium.
raised the issue of late night actions and consequently.
That's not the motion on the table.
That is true. That is not the motion on the floor. It's not.
No, What you're trying to, I'm just following, the point of order is based upon his raising the subject and talking about late nights, and I'm talking germane.
We're not talking about late nights.
We're
The
not.
motion
We are
is about
talking about the
moratorium.
motion on the floor.
All right, I will leave. We've beaten that to death. Sufficient is to say that this has been done. This has the correspondence gone and forth. It's a topic that's been discussed for a year. We're asking to come back in a couple of weeks with the ordinance so we can vote on with more information. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
I had a call today from a fellow council member that alerted me that there possibly was a breakdown in communications regarding Town Center. I got an email at almost 5 o'clock regarding Town Center. There's no collaboration in Boogeyman or anything awful going on. Just because somebody doesn't include you in a topic may not mean that.
Is this germane to the motion on the floor?
Yes, you have a, you guys.
Motion on the floor is about boogeymen or not? I mean, we're talking about ending the moratorium, correct?
No, you guys raised an issue.
One word out of what she said. She has the floor. She has one word. Boogeyman was one out of several
done.
words she used. Please let her finish.
I'm just trying to make sure that we're staying germane to the topic here.
Council, I'm not sure if this will help or not, but if the motion is to simply direct that we prepare a repealer and bring it back to you, we're happy to have a vote on it. If it passes, we're happy to do that. It'll take 5 minutes, so it's not much of an effort on our part. Obviously, the motion would have to pass, but if that helps with your discussion tonight and you move the substance of your discussion over to the 16th, then we're happy to do that. But
Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, I'm just I'm sitting here trying to digest this, and I guess everybody's smarter than I am because you had 2 hours to do it that I missed, but I can't digest it here in 10 minutes. I can't figure out if this is what this means, what this does, or anything to even figure out whether or not we should move forward. That's why I think there was some prior discussions.
Councilmember Stewart.
So I'd just like to ask that we all take a breath. I think we can move forward with civility and not have to worry. I think the motion on the floor is simply to ask that we have something prepared in 2 weeks. Nobody's asking anybody to make a final decision. No final action will be taken. So Councilmember Hornish, you have 2 weeks to go ahead and digest that. I've certainly witnessed many a motion be made, and people are in agreement. I don't think that implies anything nefarious. Mayor, when you asked to adjourn, Deputy Mayor Moran had made it clear during the city manager's reports that she had another item that she wanted to bring up. You asked her if she could wait until after the city manager's report. Then we went into executive session. So my request to wait was simply to be polite and allow Deputy Mayor Moran, if she still wanted to raise an issue. There was, again, nothing more than that. I'm happy to turn over any documentation because, well, you already have it. So if that's really where you guys want to go, if we want to, every time 4 people agree on something, if we want to investigate it.
As a precedent.
I just don't know that we really need to go there. I think we can all take a breath and take a step back and stay civil and work together. I thought earlier we had a great compromise on proclamations. I'd love to see us be able to have that kind of productive debate and be able to move forward on these things. Thanks.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Move to vote.
Second. Or third.
Okay, Councilmember Ross, you still have your light on, so
I
we either
do.
need to, there's been a call to question, so we'd have to vote. 2/3 of us would have to vote in order to not allow Councilmember Ross to speak.
I will withdraw my motion
Okay, Councilmember
to allow
Ross.
Councilmember Ross to speak.
My concern is we got professionals working together. It sounds like we're getting very close to bringing it to close. I just get concerned that we rip this out of the hands of the professionals, and a bunch of us on this diocese think that we know better, which we don't. We really need to leave it the path it's going, leave it up to those that are working the details, and come up with a mutually agreeable MOU. And I think that the outline in the email referenced in this discussion is a good start to get more closer to clarity, but I don't know why we're disrupting the process that we were on the path. So that's really my point, and I want to stay with. That's why I don't I oppose any change in the path and direction we're going.
Call the vote.
I need a motion to extend.
Move to vote.
I move to extend to 10:03.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. We'll extend to 10:03. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Nay.
Okay. By a vote of 6-1, we will stay till 10:03. Councilmember Ritchie.
Move to vote.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of having the city attorney draft an ordinance for the 10:16 meeting to end the moratorium say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 4-3, it passes. The city attorney will draft an ordinance.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
All right.